Good evening, folks. I am back. It has been a while. I do apologise for the long time away. I was busy with my parents and my family for the weekend, but we're back. We're all good. We're good to go. And I've redecorated. That was partially why I couldn't get access to my PC to get any streams in because I was too busy redecorating. But it looks nice and purple, just how I like it, which is good. And the curtains actually block out some of the light, so I get the nice lighting effect going on, which is preferable at the very least. Yeah. Hope we're all doing well. Hope we're all doing okay. Gonna be a nice chill out stream today. Just gonna do some reaction content. Nothing particularly out there or contentious or anything. I mean, I'll probably find something to get like frustrated and angry about because I basically do on every stream, but I'll try. I'll try not to. We'll see. I'm gonna destroy my set first, if that's alright. Right. We're back. We're good. Is this the angle that I wanted? No, it's not even the angle that I wanted. That's the one I wanted. That's much better. Actually getting an actual profile here. I should see my lovely new rug as well. Good. Hang on a minute. 1 second. Probably less than ideal to just have my underwear coming out of my suitcase in the picture. Probably not a good look. Probably less than ideal. Either way. Oh. So apparently there is a debate between him and Kevin Castley about whether trains are evil or not. And apparently the fact that the Nazis love trains means that everybody else should hate them. So it's a debate between Kevin Castley and him about whether trains are evil or not. And because the Nazis like trains, should we also hate trains too? As if, Hitler being a vegetarian should mean we shouldn't be vegetarians and whatever. It should be fun. Should be an absolute riot. I know Kevin Castley is like the single most demented person, like in the entirety of Twitch politics and on Twitter probably as well. Absolutely wild neocon. I covered a debate of his previously where he says that he wanted to nuke North Korea, which I'm not sure was in jest or not. It was a topic that was chosen beforehand where he said it would argue in the affirmative, but I digress. He still is an incredibly deranged warhawk, and he enjoys it when innocent civilians in the Middle East die, and he's told me that, and he's mentioned that plenty of times on Twitter about how much he loves that. So I do not have high hopes for his mental acuity during this debate. Either way, let's pop into 1.25 speed, and let's have a watch.
Hey, there I am.
Okay, and can you see me?
Yep.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, before we jump into it, maybe I should just bring up the context real quick.
Oh, this is him, the person who is doing the debate. If you are in chat and you're watching this, if you open this up in another tab, you'll get some of your view time whilst I'm watching it as well. So that it's not all of them, so you're not all just kind of leeching his views if for some reason I get raided by somebody.
We got here, so
well, I could probably like tell people who I am.
Oh yeah, sure.
Like, who's this guy?
Sure, go ahead. Let's do that.
Yeah. So I'm Kevin. I host the channel Superpower Broadcasting. I do mostly foreign policy stuff, also gaming content. And I obviously have a Twitter account, which we're going to be talking about today. So it's good to be here. I like debates. And out of a few hundred people that were getting in my face about this, some of whom very obnoxiously, but that's not, I wouldn't say that that's your fault or anything. I'd say that some people out there just don't know how to behave on Twitter. And a lot of accounts are disappearing as a result of this now because of reports filed against them. So that's great.
Fair enough.
So yeah, like just insane. It's like, okay, so you send into death threats over what? Over trains? I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying.
No, I know. It's people are fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're going to talk about ridiculous people, you are literally talking to Kevin Castley here.
Just
people are annoying.
It happens over anything, and I gotta say, I generally think that your content, from what I've seen, and we've been on panels together and stuff over on Dylan's channel. I think you're cool, and I think, you know, oh, you see this moment on Twitter, you get a bunch of likes out of it and everything. You know, I think that's good. So,
okay. Can we talk about that first though? Okay, so
yeah.
there's a couple of things I want to clear up. So what he's talking about, in case anyone's watching this on YouTube maybe later, I'm just gonna pull up the context real quick. So you had an interaction on Twitter. Just pulling it up right now. Okay, so somebody put out a tweet that said, beyond insane that half of Canada's population lives in a little strip that forms a near perfect line, and we don't have a high-speed train running down the middle of it. And that's from Quebec City to Windsor, okay? So it says, and then someone else says, Quebec City to Windsor is roughly 1,200 kilometers. China's newest high-speed rail makes the 1,300-kilometer trip from Beijing to Shanghai in less than 5 hours. The line reportedly costs 33 billion USD and will be capable of 80 million passengers a year. Then
Based.
you came in and said China is a police state doing a genocide. And then Rose, someone else, said a country can do bad things and good things at the same time. And then you said implying trains are good. And then you linked.
You're right, Josh. How you doing? We're gonna watching this absolutely fucking hilarious debate here. Already we've started off well with Kevin Castley literally going, the China do the good thing with trains. Well, have you know that China is a police state doing genocide? Okay, that's not related to the train stuff. And then you're going, yeah, well, didn't you know Hitler also used trains? He used trains to do bad things. Oh, well, I guess we've got to get rid of cars because, you know, other states have used cars to do bad things as well. In fact, Nazis invented the fucking car, apparently.
Wikipedia of Holocaust trains. I thought that was a funny interaction, so I screenshotted it and I said, this really happened. And it got 66. It got 66,000 likes.
Oh, by all means, he is an absolute idiot, sensibilium, and he will get more deranged if this goes on. I am almost certain of it.
It literally did. It did happen. Yes.
Yeah. And first of all, I want to say real quick, I have had this policy that like I didn't uphold my own policy. My policy recently has been like, if I'm going to do what I did, which is like screenshot people's tweets, I try to block out their name. And for some reason I didn't do that because I just forgot. Like, I don't know. It was my mistake because like I also didn't expect it to blow up to that level. Right. That's been my most blown up tweet ever. So like, I want to apologize if you got any like negative, you know, treatment or whatever, because like that was not my intention. Obviously, I just thought it was a funny interaction.
To be fair, the guy, even if he was named in it, he started fighting in the replies. So I'd like people were gonna find out that it was him at any rate.
No, I appreciate it, and the thing is, you don't need to apologize. I get negative interaction from like incredibly brain-led folks on Twitter on a regular basis, and you know, oh, there's this big viral tweet. There's an at there. Oh, let's go and send this guy death threats, that sort of stuff. Those aren't your viewers. Like I'm aware of that. And the thing is, it's like you literally said.
Yeah, after this debate, we're going to be getting onto so Josh, Keith did a new speech where he relaunched the Labour Party yet again with some even more vague, general sounding goals with no policy descriptions behind them. So we're going to get to his speech afterwards. Going to get through this, try and get through this as quick as possible. We might skip bits and pieces of it. If it just gets repetitive, he just goes, "Oh, train's authoritarian because there are stops and you can't go wherever you want to." I don't know. We'll eventually, we might finish this early. I'm not sure. We'll see how it goes. Then we're going to cover Keith, his new speech, and then we're going to cover the social media and legacy media kind of smear campaign against Pfizer, Shaheen.
In your tweet, right? So this really happened. And, like, look, I'm the dude who was involved in it. I think it's a funny interaction. If I thought that 67,000
and I've redecorated. That looks nice.
People were going to see that and react to it, would I have phrased it a little differently? I would say yes, but it wouldn't have gotten 67,000 people watching it. Then it would got like was a typical tweet of mine get like 1,200 views or whatever. So
yeah,
you know.
So, but again, I just want to say like I regret that I didn't block your name out. I wish I had done that, and in the future I will be more careful of these kind of things, because like to me, when you
he makes good people though. We like him.
Screenshot people's comments, it shouldn't be about who's saying this. It's more like look at what's being said, and your name being in it was just secondary and, you know, ended up bringing you negative attention. So
well I'm a public figure though, so I actually don't take any offense to it. And if I'm being honest with you, like I told some of my community, I actually appreciate the free publicity, you know.
All right,
this guy tried to tell me that the Rockefeller building looks nicer than the Moscow subway.
That's new, that this is going to become as much of a meme as it actually did. So.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, all right, so let's having said all of that as the preliminary introductions, I'm, by the way, I'm Heem. I'm a SockDem streamer, moderate left and progressive, and I think we agree on a lot of social issues and stuff. And when it comes
for
to
sure.
debating right wingers, I think we have some agreement there. But yeah, tell me about why you don't like trains, I guess.
Yeah, so this is the thing. Like, basically, my view of it is, trains in general. My issues with trains isn't as much, and hear me out here. It's not as much about the actual object of the train, the vehicle of the train, or even the track so much. It's the type of person that stands trains.
Oh my gosh, it's not even about the actual trains themselves. He's just making up shit to troll people who, have pragmatic solutions to the climate crisis. And for the working people's ability to be able to get around without having to be completely cucked by both the automotive and insurance industries.
I tend to not like those people very much for two reasons, because they tend to fall into two categories of people. They tend to fall into either the takey category, which are like radically authoritarian left wingers, who big up regimes like North Korea, China, etc., that really aestheticize and make it as a matter of public system of population management, basically extensive rail networks, and really don't like a lot of people having cars or bikes or whatever.
Yeah, if we build more tunnels, we just add more lanes, but this time underground. How am induced demand?
They like being able to control where people go. They like basically having a very central planned system. And then
I mean, the fact that he just thinks that tankies like trains, or tankies as he calls them, obviously it's not even tankies, it's just people who are, to the left of the social democratic wing of political discourse. Literally anybody to the left of that thinks are tankies, rather than, people who might have kind of objective viewpoints over the social, over the kind of the economic states that exist within, I don't know, the People's Republic of China, or that did in the Soviet Union, taking individual economic policies and talking about how they work or didn't work, and thinking, well, you said a good thing about the Soviet Union. You must be a tanky. You must want to kill everyone. You must want to starve humanity. Oh, I can't believe you said something nice about the Soviet Union. I'm like, they did a non-zero amount of good things. And if you can't recognize them for being good in their own utility, rather than having to look about them as being tied to the Soviet Union, then maybe that's your problem.
There's a lot of like these
people don't want to control where people go by using trains. In fact, they want people to have the ability to go further and into more places by there not being some kind of financial line that you have to cross to be able to afford to travel, which is what you need if you want to own a fucking car. Right? The amount to which America is entirely cut to the automotive industry and to the petroleum industry, because you literally cannot survive if you don't have a car, no matter what your financial situation is. You have to sink that money as a kind of base level to be able to do things. Like, lots of jobs wouldn't employ you if you can't drive. You might not be able to go to the supermarket, you might not go shopping, you might not be able to do anything if you don't own a car. So that kind of financial barrier essentially means that some members of the working class who earn very little amounts, after you've paid for your rent, you've paid for your bills, you've paid for your food, you've paid for your car, you've got no money left over, if you had any monies there to begin with.
What would you call them? Like destroy, nuke the suburbs type neoliberal folks who also want.
Why would it be neoliberals who want to destroy the suburbs? What? Neoliberals fucking love the suburbs. We don't want suburbs. We on the left, we want to destroy the suburbs to create mixed zoning, high density housing. It's neoliberals who want to be able to, keep housing as being some kind of speculative investment product, rather than being used to actually house as many people as possible, right? For the own utility of having more people within housing.
To enrich the Communist Party of China, and they also tend to be big fans of trains. And so both of those.
Oh, we'll be getting onto Chief Keef's slogans next up. Pig and tea break, don't you worry.
The people are not fans of mine, and vice versa. So we tend to not get along very much. Now, the whole train meme, that is something that casually came up in one of my foreign policy shows that I do every week, Gold King Rising on Saturdays, where I can't remember exactly what it was, but some like Jimmy Dore fanboy or something was big upping China and saying, oh, look at all the rail that they've got, and we don't even have that here and whatnot. And I'm just like, oh, can we not with the trains again? What is it with tankies and all these trains? And
you don't have to be a tanky to understand that China's rail network is good and is worth emulating. Again, this guy is just so fucking Red Scare McCarthyite brain dead that he thinks that you cannot make any positive prescriptions about any society that has an economic model that he disagrees with, because otherwise it means by proxy you are standing the kind of the social policies of the authoritarian nature of the Chinese government, which I disagree with. Right, I'm no China simp. I fucking hate the CCP. I hate the socioeconomic model in China is incredibly authoritarian, and the economic model is, there are some good parts and some bad parts, and I would say that the transport sector is one of the very few good parts.
I went on a little bit of a rant, and it became kind of this meme in my community of like Kevin hates trains or whatever. No, I'll say straight up, I think some trains are cool. I think the Shinkansen is cool because one, it's fast. Two, it's actually luxurious. Most of my contentions with trains are that they're slow, they're rickety, and
In what, like, it feels like this guy has like ridden on one train ride, thought that it was bad, and has never gone on a train again. It reminds me of the kind of people who listen to like one metal band and go, "Well, oh, this was terrible. I've never listened to any more metal." This proves that all metal is bad. Um, or the slow and rickety. I'm just like, hang on a minute. Do you know what? Have you never been on like the TGV? Like, if my only experience of the rail network was going on like northern rail trains between Lancaster and Arnside, then I might have a similar opinion. But there's plenty more that you can do, and not even in like China. You can look at European countries, as I said, things like the TGV, going on the train in Denmark, beautiful, loved it, incredible. And they go like, yeah, you get to go 200 miles an hour in a straight line without getting in any fucking traffic.
and it's big public managed projects of where you can and can't go, mostly authoritarian regimes trying to basically curb.
Yeah, and as Josh pointed out in chat, like if you want to, you are entirely decided where you can and can't go if you're driving in a car based on where the roads are as well.
Any sort of independent movement in transportation. The Shinkansen's a privatized luxury system that's actually very efficient and makes a lot of sense for Japan, for example. Would something like that make sense in the context of this in the case of Canada, for example? No, Canada's too huge for this to be very efficient, especially considering our massive amounts of debt and everything here. We're not in a financial position the way that Japan is to afford something like that, like they were in the boom times. So there's the financially prudent angle of it too. Is it to say that we could never afford something like that? No, it's just investing in some flashy new train project in Canada right now at a time when we really have we had a huge debt problem going into the no issue that we can't talk about on YouTube. I don't want to get your channel affected or whatever, but there was this thing that happened in a couple of years recently where a bunch of people couldn't work, bunch of governments
but you can just MMT yourself your way into trains because infrastructure spending isn't inflationary. Like, who gives a shit? Just fucking build it. It increases your productive capacity.
Make sure.
Yeah. Well, we can't talk about it on YouTube.
Okay, that's fine. You can say the word.
YouTube too, so gotta be careful. But,
okay, let me. Can I?
Yeah.
You said a lot, so I want to just I guess go one by one. So you said that a major reason that you were anti-train is because you don't like the people who are train supporters. And then you said that, well, and then to combat that, I would say like, yeah, there are a lot of people who stand, let's say, China's train system or something like that. But there's also incredible train systems in Europe. And for example,
but also China's train system is good. You can defend it on the basis of what China's train system does already, rather than having to have this protracted discussion about, well, actually, the other things are good, not by communist regimes. It does not matter. It does not matter the kind of socio-political landscape of the country in general if you can defend the train policy on its own merits.
Listen, I don't know if you live on the belt in that tweet, like between.
I don't. I'm one of the half of us that lives outside of it. Pretty far away.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. So I live in that belt, and I know that like to be able to connect those, Quebec City to Windsor in a 5-hour ride would be very beneficial to all of the cities that would be along that path, not just like the major cities themselves, but every city in between Kingston, London, Ontario, and all of these other cities. And so I want to say that, like, yeah, there are stands of trains that are China supporters or tankies, as you call them, but there's a lot of European Sockdems who love trains. Myself, I don't consider myself a tanky or a communist in any way, but I can see the utility in long distance trains, in short distance subways. Like, I'm wondering, are you against subways as well? I have a lot of pushback on this. And then like you said, Canada is too huge to have efficient trains, but like we already have a train system that connects the entire country, right?
We do.
Yeah.
It's the Via Rail system, though. It's basically a state-managed enterprise. That's
right.
Let's be real. It's no Shinkansen. And
of course, yeah, because we need more investment because we don't really care about that kind of stuff here in North America that much.
But understand the Shinkansen in Japan, which is a very dense country, even though Japan's
doesn't matter if you've got the train and people take it, then you realize that there's utility in having the train there in the first place. You have no fucking argument.
pretty long. It's very tightly packed in large urban centers, but there aren't a lot of them, and they're not 5,000 kilometers apart from each other. Most of the urban centers in Japan range between basically Osaka type area up to the north of Tokyo, and that's a smaller area than that belt even in that picture. But even for Japan, and even in a boom time when they built the Shinkansen, when their economy was in this post-war boom, lots of direct investment from the United States and stuff that we just don't have that right now in Canada. They were rich. It cost them a lot of money.
Okay.
Now it turned out to be a good investment for them, right?
So
The question is,
I want to have two different conversations here. I want to have one conversation that's about the morality of it, and one conversation about the efficiency of it. So
okay.
Let's split that up. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Because
Because you're saying like
it's your show,
okay,
Heaton, so
sure.
we'll go with
so
what.
let's talk about the morality side of it first. So like you said that it's it limits you from where you can go, and it's like has predetermined times, and like you said, the kind of people who would wait in line to go ride a
I
train.
wonder if they're going to get onto trams, because trams are like the perfect medium between the two as well. If you've got intercity trains and you have intracity tram service, you can just literally get everywhere. In Manchester, literally everywhere's kind of 5-minute walk away from a tram stop. So who fucking cares?
Or something like that. Like, so can you elaborate a little bit more on that angle of it?
Yeah, sure. So basically, in a lot of basically historically speaking, Eastern Bloc countries, centrally planned socialist economies, big train networks were basically seen as preferable to cars. It's not to say that the Soviet Union or China didn't have cars. They did build roads. They did build cars. The typical wait time for a car in the Soviet Union or East Germany and their satellite states tended to be close to a decade. And so they really didn't focus on
Yeah, of course.
making a
Those
priority
they were
car.
they were like hand making cars back then. Right?
Basically,
Yeah.
yes. You had like you had Trabants, you had all these sorts of vehicles. So they had a car industry, but under their centrally planned system, they didn't prioritize it. Now, they could have. Now, I'm not a fan of the Soviet Union, right? But the Soviet Union did have the heavy industry capacity, even greater than the US at a lot of points. They could have made that a thing. They could have just had every Soviet person have a car. Now, I would argue, I'm a capitalist. I would say, well, but American cars are going to be higher quality. They're going to have more than 25 horsepower, et cetera. But I understand the wait lines in the Soviet Union wasn't because communist system couldn't produce cars. It was that they specifically didn't want a lot of their population to have these things because
Based.
they worried that the more people had cars, the less centralized the population management from a transportation angle would be. And it's not to say that's the only factor, but similar to the
Yeah, I might not be the only factor, but I'm just kind of entirely going to intuit what I think the Soviet Union were trying to do. They were just secretly on to control everybody.
decentralization of information with the internet or free communications and whatnot. They worried that it would bring about what it eventually did with perestroika, which was free communication and free mobility. You add all these things up and you don't have a centrally run socialist economy anymore. You have a revolution. You have
But
anybody want a Larder Reaver?
I guess I don't really see why you can't have like why are you equating like a train system is gonna have to be from a socialist or communist government? Like, it doesn't have, those things don't have to be connected at all, in my opinion.
They don't have to be. In Japan is a really good counter.
Yeah, or like, listen, there's so many. Have you ever been to Paris, like, or London? Like, these places have incredible rail systems. Like,
I wouldn't call ours incredible, but it's certainly a step up from America, where they have fucking nothing.
Subway.
So
like,
France,
how do you feel about subways too? I want to talk about that.
Okay. Well, let's go one by one. So
Yeah.
you mentioned Paris. So France has the TGV. TGV's pretty good. One of the first high-speed rail lines. That one's actually, I would say I like the TGV. England, on the other hand, in particular, has a pretty bad record with a lot of their trains. A lot of their trains, in fact, some of them basically run to nowhere. They have this.
I wonder what the issue with the UK rail system is, Mr. Capitalist. Is it that it's being entirely run down because of incredibly high fares and poor working conditions due to privatisation in the 90s? I wonder whether that might be a huge issue or not. There's also, like, loads of other teething problems we have with the rail system in the UK. Like, one of the biggest problems is one of the kind of the world's first rail systems. So there was nothing for us to base the infrastructure on, so we just kind of had to do a sort of guesswork and think, well, we got to, here's an idea, let's just fucking do it, right? Whereas all the other kind of train networks in Europe, they copied us, except everything that we'd made a mistake with, they managed to get better. Like, the gauge of our rail network is too narrow, right? Whereas they've got wider rail gauges in Europe, which allows them to have double-decker trains that we can't have. So they get a lot more capacity for what they actually get from actual rail space than we do, which is a really big issue. That's a big issue about increasing capacity, and that's why HS2 is such a big project, because it was like it should really have been about capacity from from Birmingham to London, when they spent too much money trying to get it to go faster. When you actually, it's kind of asymptotic. There's only so much speed that you can get, and every extra 5 minutes or so you cut off that journey, it drastically increases the amount of budget you have to spend on the infrastructure involved in making the train go that fast in the first place. Whereas you could have just focused it on as being a project whereby you could increase the capacity, which would have been a much better use of the money, would have been a lot more efficient and much cheaper. But again, that's an issue, like an innate issue with the design that we have of our railways as it is at the moment. So there's a lot of things that we can't really fix unless we dig up all the tracks and relay new ones. Now, privatization has its other issues, and our franchise system is horrendous. I'm looking forward to it getting nationalised, because it will happen eventually. Everyone agrees that the privatization of the rail network was absolutely horrendous. There's nothing good about it, so that'll probably happen. The Tories have been kind of playing around with like kind of this part nationalised system post COVID, but I'm assuming when Labour win the next election. Although to be fair, we're kind of getting mixed messages about what their position is on rail nationalisation, because Rachel Reeves, like Angela Rayner said that they were, then Rachel Reeves said they wasn't, and then another MP came on their radio and said that she'd misheard. I haven't got a fucking clue, but it just kind of has to happen if you want to have a functioning network at this point.
Very bureaucratic system where they just have all of these lines that just don't make any sense, and now it's not from a so much socialist standpoint, but a lot of that, of course, came out of this this idea of, oh well, we have to keep these things running to keep people employed, and big bureaucracy.
No, it's just the fucking franchises own them, and they don't want to get shut down because they continue running the franchise, and because it's so massively subsidized by the fact that Railtrack are the ones who kind of take upon all of the infrastructure spending, which is a state-run company, and then the franchises get to palm all the profits off the top, while all of the issues with regards to the infrastructure get palmed off onto the state. It's an incredibly fucking toxic way of running the rail network.
To manage people, and it's like, okay, but if they're not employed doing a route that doesn't make any sense, they'd be employed doing something else.
I'm also wondering which route he thinks doesn't really make sense. Is he talking about like Lancaster to Morecambe? Because it's not exactly like a massive kind of like infrastructural burden to have these small lines, right? I mean, there's one that's like there's some, I guess, maybe some rail lines in Scotland, but these are incredibly picturesque and these are tourist destinations. I would like him to name some specific UK rail networks that he thinks are extraneous, when actually I think most of the ones we do use are used pretty regularly.
Oh, we have to ask what's the most efficient thing for a person to be doing with their labor, as opposed to, oh, well, they have a job, so it must be okay, right?
What do you think about like general public transit, like subways, or what do you think about? Are you like anti-public transit?
No, I'm not. I like subways and I like trams, monorails, that sort of stuff. I think public transit, you need to be.
Also, only does like trams at least. Okay, right.
Careful with public transit, because I think that you can definitely take it too far to the point where you're basically heavily discouraging car ownership, and I don't.
Yes, good. Get rid of car ownership. Let's fucking go. Let's get rid of all of that shit. Take them away from city centers. Turn every town into Amsterdam. Let's fucking go. Let's do it.
I don't necessarily like that. I think that insofar as public transit should exist, it should work to augment private transportation, basically. So, for example, buses,
why should
buses, well, no, I just finished. Like buses, for example, am I anti-bus or whatever? No, more buses means less congestion on the roads. Like, it's actually useful if you're a car owner, and it's useful if you're a bus rider. More buses, right? But what I don't like is this idea. Like, I've seen in a lot of people that took an issue, really big, grouchy issue with what I had to say. They'll literally say things like, "Oh, expletive cars, down with cars," and all this stuff, and I.
Yes, good, well done them.
I always find these people goofy, because it's like, okay, so you make a huge portion of your identity out of hating a form of transportation that you probably, let's be real, a lot of these people probably can't afford because they don't have a job, and they won't get a job because they spend their time.
See, it's all just projection, isn't it? It's all just like, what's the phrase that the V-Man used? Like vaguely gesturing at imagined hypocrisy. It's like, the only reason you hate cars is because you haven't got a job. And I'm like, no, I have a job. I just do not think that it is worth societally, for there being this kind of this base level of financial investment that you need in the road in the automotive industry to be able to fucking function like it is in the United States. It's lucky in here in the UK is that, and especially and in most countries in Europe and probably in China and Japan as well, is you just don't fucking need to own one. The public transport is so good that even with all of the facilities available for car ownership to be viable, no one needs to use them, right? But then again, if this continues and we continue investing in public transport like we should be doing to be able to create a more egalitarian society, it'll get to the point where no one even needs to use cars anymore because it is so efficient, it is so wide ranging. That's the end goal at the end of the day, right? And you can have road networks outside of that. Like, I'm not saying turn all of the fucking Yorkshire Dales into publicly transported areas. You're going to need a fucking Land Rover Defender to get around half of these kind of country roads in the north of England, right? But within cities, especially within places like London, places like Manchester, Birmingham, Newcastle, Liverpool, you do not need a fucking car, right? We don't want to take up space with all these multi-story car parks. Just get the train and fucking walk. I'm sorry, just do it.
I'm on Reddit and Twitter all day.
No, I don't think that's so. For example, okay, I'm gonna speak I guess about my own behalf. I didn't own a car for like 5 years. Because I lived in a place that had an excellent subway system, and I was in an area where I could move all around the city. The subway station was close to me, the grocery stores were close to me, everything was close, walking distance. I had a bicycle, and I made it work, and it was lovely. So I guess like I feel like you're really in favor of like cars. I'm not sure why it is. Like, why can't you envision like, here's my ideal society is one where train systems can connect people, connect cities, connect suburbs to other suburbs, connect these places together, and within those places around those stations there's homes built and grocery stores and everything you need to have walking distance. And then you can have like car sharing, so you have you want to drive.
I mean, sounding pretty Soviet here, Heem. That's what all of the Soviet kind of city planning was about. It was all about making sure that all of the amenities that you did need were within walking distance. By you specifically designing the cities that way, and I would agree with them.
Drive somewhere that you can't get to by train, you need to pick something up, you register like a thing, and then okay, I need a car from 4 to 7 today, and you car sharing models. I guess, why do you think that we should push so hard for car ownership?
Well, I'd say I'm more pro-car than I am anti-train, even though it doesn't really sound like that. If I had it my way, if I could just, design a city, and there are planned cities out there. There are actually cities starting from scratch, and that is a thing. They've done it in Brazil. They're doing it in Egypt right now. It is actually possible to plan out cities, and I think in the future.
Well, they literally did it in the Soviet Union that they were denigrating so early on, right? Like, literally, you look at America and the United Kingdom, we're two of the most kind of economically prosperous countries in the world, or at least we used to be. We could just literally build a fucking Magnitogorsk every 3 years or whatever, which is what they did in the Soviet Union. Just build a city from scratch and have a specific plan about how you intend these cities to fucking function. You could do that, right? And then you'd solve housing crises overnight.
Sure, what would be really beneficial to places like California, places even like Ontario and BC especially, is to just build new planned cities on undeveloped areas. And if I could start a city from scratch, I would make it so like basically every roadway, even not just the major ones, but every roadway would have like 8 lanes, like 4 each way. But
8 lanes?
But there'd also be separated like concrete barriers for protection, bike lanes, like they'd be wide boulevards essentially. So you accommodate every form of transportation, because the fact of the matter is a lot of people like cars. A lot of people like bikes. They like to exercise from it.
Wait, one second. Can I ask you a question?
I believe you can have both, and it just comes down to a matter of widening. Now, that's not practical in most of the existing cities, but I think that as population grows and as we expand our horizons, we move into more planned development areas. I think that having in mind what would you call the economic focus of public transportation, coupled with the freedom, the Canadian or American dream of car ownership, I think that they can coincide. And one of the reasons why I'm so pro car isn't like, I just think about cars all the time. It doesn't really take up that much of my thought. It's a pushback against this radical movement to try to abolish private transportation. And
no one's wanting to abolish private transportation. They just don't want cities built around the necessity for cars to be able to get everywhere, because you're having to extricate space that should be for societal congregation to create an inclusive and I guess a congregatory space, right, in the center of cities for people to be able to get on with, to be able to be able to integrate with one another, rather than having to get huge wide berths between buildings for cars and tiny little pavements for humans to walk on. This doesn't need to be a thing, right? I know Kevin loves fucking suburbs as well, which I fucking despise as well, but I live in one. I live in a kind of suburban kind of ex estate or whatever, and you probably don't need a car to get around here either because you have such good bus services and the lanes are built in such a way that it's really easy to get to the bus or train if you need to. So even then, like even within like the city limits, it's still like no reason to get a car in the UK. It also has so many other implications, not just within cities, but also within these suburban areas as well, about being able to have access to amenities, like he was pointing out previously as well. Plus, it's also safer. It's safer for your kids to be able to play in the middle of the fucking road, which you can't do anymore. You can't do that shit. You can't have kids playing in the street anymore because it's all full of cars parked on either side of the road and cars whizzing down the road every other minute, right? These would be so much better if we used to use public transportation to be able to get in and out of these suburban areas to the city centre. And then if you need a car, you've got one to be able to get out and travel somewhere else.
There aren't very many people sticking up for private transportation right now, and so I wouldn't have to be as vocal about this if more people were talking about this, because
Okay.
the fact of the matter is that our way of life, to some extent,
Okay, one
is
sec.
under threat right now. And
Okay, so listen, I you're much more well spoken than I am, so like we gotta have a little bit more back and forth if we can. If I
Okay.
ask you like a quick, if you can give me a quick answer on stuff, then we can keep the conversation flowing a little better. But when you say
Okay.
8 lanes, right? I have an
Yeah.
issue with this. How are you gonna have any? Are you like anti-neighborhood? Because if you have 8 lanes, you know that you're not gonna have any sort of neighborhood at all.
True.
Well, so within particular like subdivision type developments and stuff like that, you wouldn't need to have 8 lanes, right? You're just having like single houses. They're not going to take up that much. But in medium density areas, in high density areas, 8 lanes coupled with wide bike spaces that are like bike lanes that are separate from the roads, coupled with overhead trams and underground subways, that's a way to clear congestion. A lot of people act like, oh, subways and
No, but adding extra lanes does not. As Josh pointed out in chat already, like induced demand would mean that if you add extra lanes, people are just going to more people are just going to choose to drive by car, and then it'll just end up being in the same position where you started. Whereas if you increase the capacity of public transport, you'll be able to get more people to it. You'll be inducing demand on the public transport and free up more space on the road as well. So just it's much better and more efficient. If you need to add more space, you will want to use the thing that is more space efficient in the first place, which is public transportation. And again, and Heman's right. It still destroys the neighborhoods, whether in the city or in suburban areas as well.
and buses will clear congestion. Not really. You'd have to run an awful lot of them to do that. Having wide lanes,
No, you don't need to run a lot of them.
bike lanes, overhead trams, and underground subways in tandem clears congestion. It has
No,
to
but
be a
the
multifaceted approach, right?
I think the major problem with congestion is just cars, though. Like, because you when
That's
you
not
have
true. Have you been on the subway?
yeah, I have been, but the subway's carrying many more people, and it runs like you said on a schedule, right? There's not they're not getting into train accidents and stuff like that very often. So
And like loads of people get on the train, loads of people get off the train, and it still goes at the same time. If extra cars go, the way that the actual network functions means that you get there slower. Like the time it takes you to reach your destination is proportional to the number of cars having to use the same area at the same time, because that's what congestion does. Like congestion on a subway just means you have to squeeze into a closer tighter space and have to get pushed on like they do in Japan, right? That's the kind of the maximum you're looking at because it still fits that same timetable, so it doesn't affect the overall journey time in the same way that congestion in a car network does.
you kind of more or less know what's going on. But the problem with cars is, and this is what I was gonna say, is like, so here, I mean, like, I guess you're not really anti-trains though, because like, do you know about the GO train here? I don't know. Have you ever heard about the GO trains in Ontario?
So I haven't heard about that. Now I am anti some trains. I want to be clear. There are some trains that I'm just flat. I guess,
Okay.
but
Okay.
but there are other trains that I like. For
Yeah,
example,
'cause, like-
privatized high speed rail. So
No, but this isn't even a high-speed rail. This is
I
just
love how that his kind of metric for this is as long as it's privatized. Because if it's the government doing it, then that's when the government does stuff. As we all know, socialism is when the government does stuff. I now have that as an animated emote. So if you are a subscriber, feel free to drop the when the government does stuff emote in the chat.
just a regular train that runs overground, okay, and it brings people from all over the GTA into the city. Richmond Hill, Brampton, Ajax, wherever, right? And surely you mustn't see that like
Go
this is like
Sunset.
an obvious necessity.
Nope.
Like you can't have a city that's a major city like Toronto without having people be able to quickly and efficiently come into the city center and get out. And cars will never ever suffice because you can't have that many people going in one direction. It'll always be a traffic jam. You know what I mean?
well, see, that's the thing, is that there's this argument that, well, you can't just keep widening because congestion will fill it up and then you get this new equilibrium. That's true within the confines of particular existing cities where you only have a limited number of thoroughfares connecting them, like LA, Toronto, New York, right? These sorts of areas. I'm talking about like in the future, in the context of planning out cities, if we could do it all over again, we wouldn't just have like 5 or 6 major thoroughfares going into the city center. We'd have a lot more. And so you'd be able to clear congestion that way. But I'm not opposed to having these like medium distance or like, suburban, urban commuting routes on trains. My whole point is that there is a movement out there, and it's a growing movement I've seen in far left circles, neoliberal circles, etc. People I went to school with and whatnot, that they just want to get rid of cars. And the
I
problem.
don't know why he keeps talking about neoliberals. Neoliberals don't want to abolish cars. Cars are the fact that you can have a competitive market around cars is like kind of base level neoliberal ideology. I don't know why he keeps talking about neoliberals here. Does he not know what neoliberals means? Although to be fair, most of the neoliberals on fucking Twitter don't know what neoliberalism means. They just think they're like, these people are like third wayers, and they're just like, oh no, actually no, I'm a neoliberal. I'm like, dude, are you actually kind of in tune with people like Hayek and Rupke and people like that? I really think you are.
For me there is what, and I always say, I'm like, what's the point in having a more economical approach to these things, with the idea of, well, people will be able to get jobs and will be able to make more money, it'll open up more access to labor markets if people can travel further. What's the point in doing all of that if we scrap the aspirational aspect, which is the fact that basically everybody, not everybody, but most people, especially like most people in Western developed countries, when they imagine their self-actualized self, when they're a millionaire, they're successful, or not even a millionaire, let's say you got, like, you saved up a decent amount of money, you got 500K or whatever in your retirement, that sort of stuff. What do they imagine themselves doing? Do they imagine themselves riding the bus each day to work, or taking the train within a city?
This is such a bad argument.
No. They might imagine taking
it is,
taking a train between cities, but the aspirational aspect is everybody dreams of bowling in cars. Let's just be real about that.
No, I disagree. Who cares what everybody
No, not really.
thinks? Everybody wants to have a private jet, but you know that's not
True.
feasible.
well, no, a private jet is not feasible, but I also don't want to get rid of them. Like, there are people out there for whom it is economically feasible, right? And that is an aspirational thing. And to just say across the board, oh, we should get rid of them because they don't accommodate, say, as many people as a jumbo jet like an A380. Actually, I think A380s are cool. I also think Globemaster 500s are cool. They serve different purposes, right?
So why do you think that?
I'm not against mass transport, right? What I'm saying is these are two different things. One serves its purpose as a luxury. The other serves its purpose of accommodating as many people as possible. Both of those are actually successful things. They just succeed in different areas. It's like judging something.
So which one's the luxury? The car?
Like it's like judging a fish for being bad at flying. It's like, well, it's not designed to fly, right?
Is the luxury here the car?
Well,
It doesn't care. Like, as long as there's more freedom equals more gooder. Doesn't matter who the freedom's for and how minimized that freedom is, but if someone is being prevented from doing one thing, it doesn't matter if how many other people are gate-kept away from doing another.
The luxury.
Okay, so
car,
one
yes.
sec. So then, wouldn't the rideshare model make so much more sense? That if you want, you use the car when you need it.
But understand, right? We draw that out. And there are studies that have been done on this that show that property ownership is correlated with lower rates of crime. Now, that's mostly focused on housing. That if you're a homeowner, you tend to pay higher tax.
It's because homeowners are richer, and so people who are richer are less likely to commit crime. It's not difficult, Kevin.
You tend to be more productive, and you tend to commit crime at a lower rate. So it's a very home ownership is a great thing for societies to encourage, and it makes sense why a lot of grants are available to home ownership. Car ownership, though, is another one of those aspects where it's like if you own your own property, you're less likely to shoplift. You're less likely to burglarize. Why is that? Because, well, you now own property. You have empathy for, well, I wouldn't want somebody to break my car windows. But if everybody's just sharing everything, well, now you've taken away a fundamental aspect of what builds a cohesive and an empathetic society, which is the institution of private property, basically, and that gets eroded.
No, I disagree.
Away there now at a transportation level, and I
so you're saying that the only reason people,
like, you should have the right to do that. If you want to get together with a group of friends and share a car, that's your right to do so. But I don't think that should become the societal norm, because I think that's asking for trouble, essentially.
Wait, so you're saying that people aren't committing crime when they have home ownership because they have home?
They are.
Yeah, because they have a home now.
Well, no, I understand. Home ownership is correlated.
Yeah, I understand. I know what correlated means, but I'm wondering why you're drawing this conclusion from a correlation.
Because
there's so many other factors. Like if you have a home ownership is probably also correlated to college degrees, which is correlated to a better paying job.
It's just poverty rate.
Doesn't have it's not, and then because you have a better paying job, you're less likely to commit crime. It's not that because now you own a home, you have more respect for ownership, so you're less likely to become a
But
criminal.
also making it so that it's difficult for people to own cars, right? By prioritizing your infrastructure for public transport is not the same as changing the relationship with societal property rights. We can keep property rights exactly as they are, but but by making it so that cities aren't car friendly, we're disincentivizing it without changing the ability of people to actually purchase the car in the first place, right? So if we're only talking about negative freedom in fucking Kevin's like fairy tale ideology that he believes in, then he doesn't have to worry because everyone's negative freedoms are just as they were previously, right? They're still able to buy the car. They're still able to use the car. It's just curtailed by the areas in which the car is he has the ability to drive the car in the first place. Yeah, I like him to demand better.
Right.
Okay, but of the various factors that you can put into that multivariate, what would you call it, relationship, are you going to argue to me that the home ownership component has zero effect on the reduction in crime? Because no economist would claim that it's zero. They might say it's like 8% or 10%, but they're not going to say it's zero.
You're asking me, so just to clarify, you're asking me if I
Like,
think that home ownership,
has
that
an
the
effect.
reason that people are not committing crimes because they own a home now.
Well, I'm not saying that it's the sole factor, but I'm saying that of the factors that you can throw into the equation that explain the reduction in crime as a result of homeowners, you mentioned things like having a college degree, a higher paying job, and all that sort of stuff. The fact that they are also homeowners, because there are people out there that have college degrees. Hell, there are millionaires that rent, for example, right? Because they put all their money in the stock market. They don't want to have that huge loss of cash. So they just, David Pakman's one of those types of people where he's arguing.
Yeah, so we're showing. So again, you're showing here that the corollary here is wealth, not home ownership. Home ownership is just something else that is also linked to the other factor that is the causative relationship.
You'd like just never buy, just rent and save all your extra money. You'll get richer. And there's an argument, especially in some of these cities and stuff, that actually makes more sense. What's the stock market average is 6%, realty average is 3%, right? But we're not talking about how fast can you get rich. We're talking about the effect on society as a result of crime. And in that specific relationship, yes, the college degree, lower rate of crime. Higher income, lower rate of crime. But home ownership, you're not going to say it's zero. You know that that's a component.
So
right?
No, the reason that I would say that it's probably negligible is because if you were to construct a society in which home ownership is now completely banned, all you can do is rent, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not advocating for this, okay? I'm just saying hypothetically, if we lived in a society where you could only rent, the people who still have the higher education and the better jobs, you will see the exact same rate of crime, I think. It's not the home ownership part, it's the having a stable house, a roof over your head. Be stable with no car, with no home. You can rent a car when you need. Like I said,
thing yet.
So I'm asking, what's your intuition tell you?
Well, my intuition would tell me one thing. It would tell me, well, now we've taken that out as any sort of factor of distinguishment, and that's conducive toward let's ban cars is dumb because electric cars exist. And I'm actually myself a huge advocate of nuclear energy. I think electric cars are stupid if your area is powered on like coal-fired power stations.
Hang on a minute, saying, oh, well, I'm assuming they're onto the climate change argument, trying to skip through all this home ownership, right? But hang on a minute. He's trying to say, oh, well, hang on a minute, you shouldn't have to care about there being no cars because electric cars exist. And so if your worry is climate change, then we have like then we have an environmentally friendly version of the cars. Like, how much energy and how much natural resources get taken up to manufacture the electric cars in the first place? How many people in the Democratic Republic of Congo have to die to mine the cobalt to put into the batteries in the electric car?
Like, so you're virtue signaling about saving the earth, but when you plug it in, you're turning on the clean coal, as Trump would say. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. Right?
Okay, so first of all, I'm not a climate doomer, okay, and I still advocate against cars, not because of the doomerism aspect of it, but because you and I both agree that cars are a harm to the atmosphere, right? Like,
they're depends. I don't.
The additional manufacturing that has to go into supplying every single fucking person in the country with a fucking car, which we have to in America because you literally need a car to be able to function, right? And then you have to continue replacing that car over and over again because of planned obsolescence, as opposed to trains, which, if we look at the UK, for example, we've been using similar trains for decades and decades now. Now, mind you, they do definitely need updating. but the rate at which you have to replace them is much lower, and the rate of new manufacturing that goes into one train which carries loads of people based upon one car per family, right? There's so much less manufacturing. I don't, and it's less energy to be able to run continuously. So he just like every point that Kevin's making here makes no fucking sense.
Think a lot of electric. Look, an electric.
Wait,
car,
sorry, we're not. I'm talking about regular cars, and then we'll get to it.
Okay, so it just like it gives you like the environment is better, the urban space is better, it's cheaper for new members of the working class to be able to afford to use, and it takes up less space overall. It's just better. It's just better in every fucking way.
Electric cars, regular cars. You agree that are causing harm to the environment, not to the doomerism, the world is going to end or whatever, but there are things that we can see. Look at the forest fires, the rising sea levels, the polar ice caps melting, and so on and so forth. Like these are measurable things, right? And do you agree that cars contribute to this?
Well, yeah, I would say that I agree that they contribute, but I think a lot of people would be surprised at the extent to which they do contribute, which is not as much as most people think. The fact is, a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions, like a huge amount, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I remember when I said it was like 40% or something stupid, comes from agriculture. Now, I'm not like anti-farms or whatever, but I think it's funny when some of these like anti-car...
Because farms are necessary to be able to grow the crops that are the basis of the vast majority of the ways in which humans consume food, at least right now. Right, so to be able to get rid of farms would be nonsensical. But like, for example, look at the Netherlands, where they have a current policy of trying to halve the number of livestock, because livestock are actually probably the biggest polluter out of the kind of the farming industry, and that's a good plan to try and reduce emissions. But you need a car because we have perfectly fine alternatives, especially if you live in cities or whatever. Like I'm saying, there's definitely some utility to having cars, at least in some places, but there is plenty of places where we could just get rid of them completely and it would just be better for everybody, apart from a very small minority of rich people. And quite frankly, fuck them, I don't care.
Guys, like, are some of them vegans or whatever? For sure. I'm positive some of them are. But then you see like the Hozoid types where they're obviously all about like, yeah, I eat beef and stuff or whatever. It's like, dude, your beef that you're eating contributes way more to greenhouse gases than...
When has ever cared about climate change? Like, Infrared only uses his platform basically to troll at this point. He's just kind of a meme character to try and build a platform off trying to appeal communism to social conservatives. Like, when has he ever talked about climate change ever?
Even
or trains for that matter.
Go out and buy like a Hummer or whatever, you know. I'm not saying go and buy a Hummer, like you know, if it's an electric Hummer, that'd be kind of cool. But you know,
I'm just trying to find
agriculture in particular.
So, but we have to eat, right? We have to eat. But we can find alternative sources of transportation without inconveniencing people too much, or the minor inconvenience would be a good trade-off, I think.
But we can find alternative means to eat. Now, I'm not like some go vegan type
or eating grains, right?
Dude or whatever. But I would say agricultural reform is going to yield far better environmental outcomes than let's ban cars, let's get cars off the road, even just regular normal cars, because they don't have as big an effect as agriculture. You look at Brazil, for example. Brazil's a country where more of an area of Brazil than France, Germany, and the UK combined goes into cattle production, for example. And a lot of that, you have a twofold factor. You have very inefficient means, a very unsustainable means of animal.
I'm enjoying the comment in Heem's chat. What about all the American and Canadian dream to own a farm?
Husbandry going on there, coupled with the deforestation component, so it's a double whammy. You get rid of more of the Amazon.
Listen, I agree with multiple ways of trying to solve, like, there's a multifaceted approach, but I think that the major reason why people are anti-car comes from, hey, these cars are inefficient. You and I both know that when you look in the road, most of the time there's only one person in a car, right? That's why they have the carpool lanes, that if you just have two people in the car, you can go in you get special privileges. But most people just drive with one car, and they're inefficient for climate change. I think I'm seeing here that they contribute to 15%.
Yeah, 15%. So it's like it's not,
and that's just car operation, and not including like what it takes to actually manufacture the cars in the first place.
Like most people, if you ask them, they would say it's more than 15%. Well, you've got whatever.
Yeah, true, Josh.
Whatever your chart you're looking at, what's the agriculture component? My guess is
I'm trying to find. I mean, yeah, I'm sure agriculture is higher.
Because here's the thing: every single car that you see on the street can be replaced with an electric car.
Wait, sorry, agriculture is 11% of greenhouse gas emissions. This is from the EPA. So I assume
that's for the United States.
Yeah.
But when we're talking world, okay, but the US is more sustainable.
No, but the US has there's far more cars than literally everywhere else, right? Let me have a look, right? And let me see countries by cars per capita. There you go. Like, if you take away micronations, it's first. Like, it's on par, just around about with New Zealand, and then the top 5 are all micronations: San Marino, Andorra, Malta, Liechtenstein, Monaco. Then it's New Zealand and United States, right? 290 million cars, almost 300 million cars, almost 1 car per person, right? So hang on a minute. So that's why it's such a massive issue when we're talking about the United States specifically. Say, oh, hang on, you look at the world, it's kind of mostly an agriculture issue. And it's like, well, no, the America has so many cars because urban areas are designed so inefficiently that it is necessary to be able to change the overall transport landscape in the United States, because they're just the biggest problem. I wonder what percentage of that 15% of car emissions causing global um, like greenhouse gas emissions is just American cars. What's the next closest? Yeah, everybody else is maximum in the tens of millions. Wasn't like what, India? Hundreds of millions, is it? Maybe India's the next one down. Oh, China's for 307 million. Okay, so actually, there's more cars overall in China. So it's probably similar between China and the United States. But obviously, China has like quadruple, or I think it's like 5 times that of people in China than in the United States. So per capita, it's way lower. But again, I'm not sure what the emissions are like, or the kind of cars that they use, or the amount of journeys that they take, considering the public transport system. But it'd be interesting to see the stat breakdown there. But per person, right? So are those the only 2 countries with hundreds of millions of cars overall? Yeah, even India, the second most populous country in the world, only has 74 million cars. Doesn't even break the 100 million mark. It's only China and the United States that have more than 100 million cars overall.
Agriculture production than a lot of like the world. A lot of the
Okay,
world.
so then, sorry, so then the next step would be, okay, we do agriculture efficiently. Now we have to move on to the next thing, which is cars.
Yeah,
Like,
I would
and
say
you know,
that-
US is a super car heavy, like it's all built to have cars, right?
Right.
So
yeah,
now,
but here's the thing, right? You can solve that entire problem right there without getting 1 car on the net. Obviously, you have to change out the cars, but without removing 1 car on the net from the streets. How? Make them electric and ensure that the power that's charging them is nuclear fire.
So I 100%, I'm pro nuclear energy. Okay.
Okay, good.
I'm a physics major. I'm
Okay.
nuclear is based. Okay. I'm a radiation physicist, but
Okay, cool.
that's not happening yet, right? And there isn't the public support for nuclear for a push for nuclear plants, and they take decades to set up. And they're very expensive, and then it takes time to get. Right. Yeah, I agree. But they're not happening, right? So in the meantime, why not push for trains, which in my opinion, we haven't really even gotten to this. Every time that again, I'm going to go back to the Go Transit, because the Go Transit is like what sold me, okay? It connects suburbs of Toronto to Toronto, and what it does is, just by building the train systems and
All right, Bilderberg, how you doing? We're about halfway through. At this point, we're trying to argue about the climate impact of cars versus agriculture, despite the fact that that America has the second most cars of any nation in the world, and the only kind of non-micronation that has a higher number of cars per capita is New Zealand, which is obviously tiny in comparison to the United States. So.
having the train stations there, it literally like jolts the economy around that train station. So you'll get stores, you'll get housing, you'll get suburb what is it? Subdivisions that will all of a sudden start popping up around there, because people can drive to that train station, park their car there, or get to the train station, and then come to the city and work in the big city, right? So in addition to just transporting people, it also stimulates the economy around the areas that it is, and it makes those places viable, I think.
No, okay, so here's the counter argument. I'm not disagreeing with that, but the counter argument is the city that I live in, one of the near suburbs to it, but still separate. If you look at like a satellite image, a development really sprouted up after the highway was widened and a number of like significant overpasses and a mall were built, and there's no rail transportation involved here. So you can do that effect with a highway. You can also do that with rail, right? You can do that with both, and so I'm not disagreeing with that. What I would point out is, especially on these intercity ones, I don't so much have a problem with the what would you call it, the intra-city components, but on the intercity rail networks, we're talking about a huge price tag, because now we're not talking about hundreds of millions of dollars or a couple $1 billion. Now we're talking about like seriously like percentage point deficit inducing expenses that at this point that's like a dude who's 100K in debt going out and buying a new BMW on financing. It doesn't make sense. We're not Japan in the 70s. We're not.
But
Japan
it's the difference
so.
is though that buying that BMW is a bad investment, whereas this is a good investment.
Yeah, and as I said, you can just MMT it because, as I said, infrastructure spending isn't inflationary. So fuck it, who cares?
Well, but we could do that with a good investment. Let's say it's not a BMW anymore. Let's say it's a dude who's like, let's say instead of 100 now it's 200K in debt, and they go out and buy $1 million house or whatever. Houses tend to go up in value, so you might think that that's a good investment.
If you can get the mortgage and afford the mortgage payments, go for it.
Well, let's say, well, we're gonna have to borrow money to build a train. The government isn't just gonna cash flow the train.
Sure.
It's something that generations of kids.
I'll be interested to see how much maintenance spending is done per passenger or per mile traveled per passenger or whatever, comparing and to rail. I don't know if there's any stats for that. If someone in chat wants to have a look-ski-poo on the old Google.
Gonna have to pay for, because
Sure.
we never pay for anything just with cash.
Yeah,
as a government,
but then
right?
even more generations, once it's paid off, will use it. That's why I think they're so blessed. Like the rail system, the Via Rail, right? It's
like
old
one
as
of
hell.
the highways I was driving on recently is like, it's been a thing since like before my parents were even born. Like generations use highways.
Of course, yeah, we need to have highways too. But like, I think I guess like every argument pro highway, is I can make a better argument for the train, I guess. Like a train station, like I mentioned, it will build subdivisions of, but like highways, you can have highways. You have a highway that runs all across Canada. It hasn't stimulated, the cities that it runs through. But I want to
look at Langford. Look at Colwood in British Columbia. They were directly stimulated by the widening of the.
But imagine if they had the transit system that ran to, let's say, Vancouver. I don't know if they're close or if that's feasible, but
that would require a very long bridge or tunnel.
Anyways, and the other thing that trains are really, really good for that we didn't even get to is transporting goods, right?
Yeah, I have an issue with freight trains.
Okay. So if you're gonna build the system, the rail, you might as well have people going on it too.
No.
And then because you can just build them, you can just build tracks side by side, right? And then you have one lane for freight and one lane for kind of passenger travel. And then if you need to open up additional capacity for more passengers, you have that option because you have the rail side by side at that point too, right? If you have a specific timetable for freight trains, between those freight trains, if you have specific high capacity times for passenger transport, you can just add extra capacity on the back of that as well.
See, here's the thing, right? You can't run a Shinkansen on your standard freight train because freight trains aren't built for speed and luxury. They're built for efficiency. And that usually means running at a much slower speed. And the types of trains, the types of tracks that, not the most enjoyable ride, right? But it doesn't matter.
Like in the UK, our passenger trains and freight trains all run on the same tracks. That's nonsense.
If it's just your goods on there, nobody cares, and the dude who's driving it gets paid a lot of money, so it's all good. But the sorts of high speed rail projects, like if we were to try to replicate the Shinkansen in Canada, we're not talking about a few tens of billions or even $100 billion. We're actually, and I'm not making this up, we're talking about over the course of the project, over $1 trillion, well over $1 trillion.
That is abject nonsense, Kevin. I'm sorry. You're going to have to pull up some stats for that. Otherwise, I do not believe a single fucking trillions of dollars to connect some cities with high-speed rail. No, that's just absolute nonsense. We look at HS2 as only just capped into kind of the tens of billions after so many additional projects been added on top of it, so much litigation that's been gone through and so much planning stages to begin with. And also to be able to get to additional speeds it doesn't even need to get to. That's only just crossed into the tens of billions. To say that it would take like 100 times HS2 just to connect up the Canadian cities with high-speed rail, that's some straight nonsense.
$1 trillion investment in a country that's like 10 months of our output. It's like we can't afford it. I'm not saying never do it. Well, look, it's the same as the.
Well, I guess they're going trillions of Canadian dollars, which I guess that's about what that works out actually basically around 500 billion sterling, right?
I'm not saying never buy $1 million house. All I'm saying is don't do it when you're that far in debt. Clean up the debt first, get some assets together. That way, if something ever goes wrong, you can actually pay to fix it and not have to move out. It's like
for some reason he says he hates neoliberals when he's literally just talking like a neoliberal at the moment.
It's a good thing rather than a nightmare, basically. And so in this case, what I'm saying is our priorities as a country, we have to look after our foundation before we do some repainting and make the house shiny, right? Our foundation right now is a mess, especially post the no issue that we can talk about on YouTube.
But sometimes you have to, the foundation is broken, you build new foundation, or you scrap it and you know what I mean? Like, I think that, like, again, I'm going to use that same example of the Quebec City to Windsor. I can't tell you, as someone who lives in that belt, how much of an impact it would have if you could go from Windsor to Quebec City in 5 hours. That would stimulate all of the cities that are like stops along the way, like you wouldn't believe, because it makes those viable cities now. You don't have to, right now, people have to stay within a very close proximity to Toronto in order to be able to work here. But imagine if you could live hundreds of kilometers away, like a 20-minute train ride into the city. All of a sudden, those cities and the real estate there, and then the kids go to school in that city, and it just like, it stimulates everything. That's why I think it's a worthwhile investment.
Okay. So I would say to you, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that. I mean, it's apparent that in cases like the TGV or the Shinkansen in Japan, that you have examples of.
He keeps talking about the fucking Shinkansen. He loves the Shinkansen because A, it's fast, B, it's luxury travel for rich cunts, and also because it's private. It's a private network, and he loves the fucking private sector.
That's definitely happening, but I would counter by saying that,
and as you said, Bilderberg, trains are like a foundational network they're able to use for everyone to want to use. It should not be a luxury like the Shinkansen is. It should be something that everybody has access to from a base level to try and reduce the overall financial footprint upon transport that gets burdened upon the working class, especially in the United States and to a lesser extent Canada at the moment, because of how car-centric the infrastructure already is, where there's a great deal of initial financial investment, which is much harder to be able to reach if you're a working class person rather than a middle class person.
You're only looking at one side of the equation, which is
to be fair, like he's specifically talking about trains as a concept rather than trams or subways, I think.
The benefits, you're not looking at the cost of it, and I'm trying to highlight here the costs. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm also not saying don't do the BMW thing either. All I'm saying in this example is the key point in that example is the debt. We're not in the position where we can afford this. It's nice to have. It's a luxury.
Well, I don't think it's actually been like suggested legitimately, right? It was just more of like a fantasy. But it seemed like you came out against the fantasy as well.
Okay, well, what I've seen, especially on the internet, like I've been getting like all these like urbanist type videos that from different people, that they're all basically the same video. It's all the same kind of condescending. Ooh, cars bad. Anybody who's 5 years older than me bad. Single family housing bad. All these memes basically, where it's like, okay, so you've indicated to me that you can't afford a house, you can't afford a car, and you probably can't afford a bike. So why am I going to take your advice on anything? But okay.
I don't know what I think. So people like, again, I think most people can afford a car, right? Most people can afford at least a basic car, especially in the United States, but they shouldn't have to, and it shouldn't take up such a huge chunk of their income, whilst making the cities unlivable, the lanes congested, the climate destroyed, our floor plans being used for like hideous car parking centers, whilst also meaning they can't have any. They take up so much of their actual money that they don't have anything left to consume with and then power the economy as they should do as the consumer class, right? All of it's fucking bad. And again, obviously, he said, "Oh, you can't afford a house because it's all single families only." I was like, "Well, because I'm not a fucking single family. I need people. I don't need a house for a single family. Like, obviously, I'm in the lucky position of being a fucking homeowner at this point. There's huge swathes of people in the UK, in Canada, in the United States, in Australia, right? All these places where they can't afford to buy a house because they're prohibitively expensive because they've been planned incorrectly. And that's the issue."
Okay.
And he's saying, "Oh, well, you'll bootstrap harder and you'll be able to get onto our artificially scarce system of home ownership and our prohibitively expensive mode of car ownership." I was like, well, hang on a minute, we can change it. Like, the fact that you just grown up into a system that benefits you specifically doesn't mean we can't change that system to make sure it's more beneficial for more of society in general.
Look, my point here is...
But I don't think that's a good way to judge arguments.
The point is that you're not considering the other side of the... because if we were to apply this logic, right, Heem, to the house ownership, like let's say $1 million house, right, which is like kind of below average in a lot of the areas that I live near. So it's like an average house. It's like a bungalow basically. Where are the benefits of the house? Well, it's a place to live. It's your own property. You get to paint it whatever color you want. You get to listen to music as loud as you want. You can have friends over. You don't have to worry about the
You can do the same with renting though. Wait, hang on.
You can't really though, Heem.
My point is that there are benefits to the house, Heem. Benefits to the house. But then somebody like somebody comes aside like Dave Ramsey or something and says, okay, but the cost is $1 million, and you're like, oh well, it'll like stimulate.
Wait, hang on one sec. Wait, one sec. If you own a house versus if you rent a house, the amount of noise you can make doesn't make a difference. You have to go by the bylaws.
Well, if you rent the basement suite of a house, you are limited on your noise by the.
Well, yeah,
landlord
you're
who
in a
lives above you.
basement. Yeah, you have neighbors. Yeah, like it's the same as anything else. But just ownership
See,
alone.
it's fine. We'll all just quit our jobs and become management
If
consultants.
you have a house or you rent a house, it's the same. You can make the same amount of noise. But the other thing I wanted to say was yeah, like you're bringing up this argument that like a lot of these.
I don't think many of them are kids. Most of them are millennials, right? People between the age of 27 and 40 who were sold the the British dream or whatever of being able to have the vocation and the career and the picket fence and the kids in the car, and now they can't afford it because it's been, especially with regards to housing, it's been tied up as speculative investments since the kind of whole scale privatization in the 80s, and they've been completely extricated from the ability to be able to get onto the housing ladder. Like, that's the issue.
I don't know
In
if you're.
fairness, look, if they're broke and they're a kid, it makes sense. But in fairness, some of these people are like in their 40s and
Sure,
they can't
but
afford a car.
I'm one of those people. I'm anti-car and I'm pro public transit. I'm not a tanky. I'm not a communist. I'm not a socialist.
Okay.
I'm a liberal. Like I'm a cold-blooded liberal. All right. But the thing I want to push back on more, and we kind of got derailed, is like so the
Derailed.
good one. So we the climate change thing, right? I want to ask a little bit more about that. So I think that's the big reason why people are pushing against it, is because we've realized like these cars are inefficient. Electric cars are nice, I'll agree, but mining the coal, mining the what do they use for the battery? The lithium, right? Mining the lithium, creating the battery, and like and then obviously if it's a coal powered electricity, all of these things mean that it's not really doing much, as you said.
Okay.
So
well, I think electric cars at a coal-fired station are stupid. I don't even think they're an improvement. I think they're dumb.
Okay, so what do you suggest? In the meantime, if we can't get those nuclear plants built like you and I would like, what do you suggest we do? Nothing until we get those nuclear plants, or what do you suggest?
No. What I suggest is, I know it might sound a little bit radical, but it's actually been done in reverse before. What I suggest is doing the anti-Germany model. So Germany did a really radical model where their Green Party and their like the Merkel stuff and everything. They're basically their ruling class, their ruling coalition decided that nuclear power is spooky nookies.
Yeah,
we don't like nuclear power, so they just shut them all down. And so now that's radical. What I propose is equally radical, but I want to do anti-Germany. I just want to say, okay, we're just shutting all coal and gas-fired stations down.
Okay, but you're not in charge right now, so like.
No. But you asked me. You
sure,
didn't ask,
I know, but I mean, like,
Trudeau. You asked me.
No, so that's just like that's fucking bananas. You're just gonna shut down all of the electricity production without maintaining some kind of transfer to the system, rather than just going cold turkey. Okay, well, I guess we'll just deal with the rising blackouts and the rolling blackouts until we get our renewable energy system up and running. Like, do you know how long it takes to commission a nuclear power plant, Kevin?
Sorry, when I ask you, I mean, like, what do you think is reasonable and a possible, like, what kind of advocacy do you think is actually realistic? I guess.
Well,
I think
building
building public transit, building another new rail system is much more feasible and much more likely to happen than shutting down all the coal plants tomorrow.
Well, yeah. Over the long run, well, I think here's the thing. If you ask me tomorrow, like if we're just on the time frame, what's more likely to happen just tomorrow? We shut down all the coal plants, or we build high-speed rail on that line that was brought up in the tweet? I think shutting down the coal plants immediately happens sooner.
This guy has soup for brains. What the fuck is that? Oh, it's much easier to shut down all of the coal plants in the whole country than it is to build a single line of high-speed rail. This guy literally is just demented.
I think that's actually an easier thing to do politically.
But you also have to build the nuclear plants that will be able to carry the load, right?
Yeah. And so this is the thing.
Yeah,
like,
so the 5 years it takes to commission a fucking nuclear plant
overnight.
That's without all the kind of the planning issues beforehand.
Oh, but it's a transitionary
So you'd
process.
rather
I get that, but understand. Would I prefer us to be on nuclear or on high speed rail? I prefer us to be on nuclear. That's going to have a much bigger impact.
How about you do both? Yeah, quite in the Canadian winter, I think they would definitely value at least some amount of energy.
And there's a very, very important secondary factor to this, which is, of course, what I talk about all the time, which is the geopolitical component to it, which is that why did Germany shut down the nuclear reactors? So you might say, well, they
propaganda.
were worried about. Well, no, it was because Germany and their ruling elites have a direct financial, cozy relationship with the Kremlin, and the Kremlin in particular has been very good at, insidiously good at.
Oh, there we go. It's the Russians' fault. It's all the Russians' fault, isn't it, Kevin? Literally everything can be blamed on the Russians.
Promoting this like climate alarmism.
Yeah, I'm not surprised with Fukushima Daiichi. That's probably the, we had the second worst nuclear incident of all time, and they were like, oh, we don't want a part of that. Now, I think that's a silly point of view. Personally, nuclear plants are incredibly safe, especially nowadays. It was only a freak tsunami that caused the issue at Fukushima, which you don't really have to worry in Germany, right? You don't have to worry about many freak weather events as long as you're safe about it. But yeah, I'm not surprised that Fukushima was what they did. In fact, there's a fully potentially operational nuclear power plant in Austria that was commissioned that never got put into service because of worries. Because of course, I think by Chernobyl at the time. There's a good Tom Scott video about it.
In a lot of these left-wing circles and stuff in Europe for the specific intent of getting rid of nuclear energy and keeping them dependent on basically Russian.
Left what? What? Wait, the left wing people wanted people to be relied on Putin. Does this guy literally just have like an actual? Is it just like the monkey with the symbols clapping in his brain? It must be, surely.
Russian fossil fuels. So,
But wait, what if they're climate alarmism? Wouldn't they have more nuclear plants?
Well, no, because it's not. It's when I say insidious, I'm not saying it's logical. What it is they want to steer the Green parties in the direction of promoting Russian oil interests, and so that
is abject nonsense. That is. This guy's off his fucking rocker.
That's why they go after nuclear energy. It makes no sense to be all about caring about the environment and being against nuclear energy. Yet a lot of people are like that. Why is that? Well,
because of the. I think
most people are against nuclear energy because the time it takes to be able to commission and get them up and running and change the network to make them more beneficial to the additional power you get from nuclear is too long. It's not good enough now, right? It's unfortunately there's not enough time to be able to get those up and running, to be able to avert the issues that we have with climate change, to be able to get to our climate goals. Actually, for countries like France that are already on the nuclear train already, that's great. Continue on the nuclear train. That's actually really good. If you've set up already, then it's well worth continuing that transition. But for countries who aren't into nuclear already, the capital and the manufacturing that has to go into building a nuclear power supply now, it's not really worth it. You're better off going with cheaper, more efficient, especially considering how much more efficient wind and solar is nowadays than it was 20 years ago at the kind of golden age of new nuclear developments. You're much better off doing tidal or hydroelectric or wind power or solar right now, rather than trying to build a new nuclear infrastructure way off the kind of the horses bolted, so to speak.
Because you want those nuclear plants gone so you can sell more oil and gas, right?
I don't know if it's that or if it's just like the Chernobyl.
This guy just like has. He's just a McCarthy. He's a McCarthy guy who thinks that Russia is still communist when it isn't.
Propaganda and the fear mongering from all the accidents that have happened. I think that's more what it is.
That's a factor, but you got to keep in mind that the Russians don't just exclusively work with the alt-right and stuff. They also work with the far left, and
this is not a right-left thing, though.
Well, no, but
they work with like Caleb Maupin. I don't think you can really call them a proper leftist.
That's the thing. It's not. That's why they work with both sides, because both sides in Europe help Russia. Both sides do. Whether it's the nationalists that hate immigrants and all this stuff and cause all that kind of chaos and riots, Russia loves that. Or if it's these environmental, virtue signaling goofballs that want to get rid of all the nuclear reactors, Russia loves it because it just means they get this, like they're the gas station of Europe. Of course, they want countries off of nuclear.
Gotcha.
And they have their tentacles everywhere, man. I mean, they literally hacked into the U.S. election and hacked into 30 states' voter registries in 2016, and this was confirmed.
What does that have to do with it?
Problem is, you're speaking to Kevin Castley. Everything is a Russia problem. Everything is an issue to do with Russia.
Is that their intention is to meddle in other countries' affairs for their own economic and political self-interest. And if you're the largest producer of gas in the world, the largest producer of oil in the world, which they were at many points in the last decade, they're kind of tied with Saudi Arabia. It fluctuates. If you're the largest polluter in the world, you want to have dinner with Jill Stein, like he did. You want to have dinner with the Green Party. You want to keep the environmentalists close, so you can co-opt them to your own devices.
I don't know. I guess like
more oil and gas.
The way you're making it sounds like Germany is like cucked to Russia. Is that right?
It absolutely is. I had an interview with the guy who lives there, Timothy.
But
one sec, neocon is
they have the wait 1 sec. They have the 4th biggest economy in the world, and Russia is not even on this list that I'm looking at.
Yeah, it's like the meme of like Putin being like the small guy who controls like this huge wrestler dude or whatever. It's like, that's it. Germany is much more economically stronger than them, but politically
they're 11th. Russia's 11th, by the way.
They're like a mouse. Like economically speaking, Russia's the mouse and Germany's the bear. But politically speaking, Putin's the bear and Germany's the mouse. Like,
Okay, I don't know.
but Putin exerts his willpower. I don't like Putin. He's my enemy, but he gets what he wants. Germany, on the other hand, they're like, yes, master, yes. It's pathetic. It's
I don't
embarrassing.
know. I
All their
guess,
virtue about like human rights and stuff. No, they care about, ooh, we've got our bankrollers, and the thing is, it's not even like Russia's bankrolling the German economy. They don't have the money to do that. It's the personal connections of people like Schultz and people like Merkel
I guess
and whatnot.
I don't know enough about
like,
the interdynamics
and their
of these
friendships with these oligarchs, where it's like, yes, Germany as an economy is bigger, but understand these people.
Well, I think that's an issue with like the oligarch like financial interests within Europe, right? It's not Putin putting his strings there. It's just the amount of Russian money that gets laundered throughout Europe, and obviously Britain is a really big issue with that. But hang on a minute, if maybe that's an issue with the way in which capital is kind of infecting all parts of a state state action within European countries. I wonder if that might be a problem with the system, so to speak, Kevin.
Can't do corruption within Germany. That would
wait. I have a question for you. Do you think that?
They do
what about
abroad?
This your argument is kind of. I'm gonna have to push back a little bit.
Okay.
You're bringing up Germany, but like no country is like very open to nuclear energy, more because of the reason that I said. I think.
Well, but that is a thing that would have dissipated over time. The Russians have kept the flame going because it's in their interest to have.
It's not just in their interest.
Oh yeah, 100% Bilderberg.
Interest though. It's in every oil. It's in Saudi Arabia's best interest. It's in America's best interest.
Oh,
like
okay,
yeah, right.
But Saudi Arabia doesn't have networks of bots across social media. I
don't know.
The Russians are better at getting us to act against our own interests. Saudi Arabia doesn't really do that. They just kind of sit back and make money basically. Russia, on the other hand, is like they're trying to they're literally invading Europe. They're like funding and hyping up alt-right and like far left protests to like beat up each other, even though both were organized out of St. Petersburg in the US. They want to cause as much chaos as possible. Does Saudi Arabia want to do that? No. If they did that, they might have less buyers for their stuff. They actually want the world to be stable, so there's more people to give them money reliably.
Got it.
Basically. So
okay, and then listen, chat wanted me to ask you about the
then if so, Kevin, why did they cause a fucking oil crisis in the 70s?
The trains.
When they clearly were using their position as an oil distributor to be able to do leverage on Israel-Palestine.
The Nazi trains.
Yeah.
Why did you post that as your reply? I guess was it a meme?
Yeah. No, it's a reference. It's basically a reference to a debate that I had recently. I debated one of these like notorious neolib guys, Micah Irfin, who runs. I think he runs or he's associated with the guy who runs neoliberal. And of course, that's one of my proudest incidents of getting blocked by anybody on Twitter and Reddit was by that group. Them and Shuan had our badges of honor to be blocked by. I debated him. And when I brought up now, it was not. I want to be clear. It was not scheduled to be a debate about the Uyghur genocide. I don't actually explicitly.
Micah Irfin is a sock dem. He's a social democrat. He's not fucking neoliberal. I know he's got a globe in his name, but that's mostly just a troll.
Schedule genocide debates because I don't think I don't like the optics of debating a genocide if it's happening. Right. It's like that's stupid, right? I did that before. I debated Hawes about that last year, and I also debated some other tanky about that. And I was just like, you know what? And I got a lot of pushback by people like that. And Dylan Burns is like, yeah, don't do it because it legitimizes. It makes it look like, oh, one. But
what does this have to do with what does that have to do with my question?
I'll answer your question. So basically, in the debate, the issue of China came up. The CCP and everything and what's going on over there. And I was saying, like it was a foreign policy debate, but we got on this topic and he actually downplayed the Uyghur genocide. And there's this clip and it's on my Twitch and it'll be up on YouTube soon where he says, oh, well, you called it genocide, but what I've seen from people is, they're really they're calling it a cultural genocide, but it's not really a genocide. And I'm like, dude, and we went into like this half an hour thing and he talked about how in China, he's like, yeah, China is bad. I'm not like defending China or whatever, but understand there are counterfactuals there. They've lifted a bunch of people out of poverty. We got extensive trade relations with them. And if I recall correctly, he also mentioned the trains. And if he didn't mention the trains, his buddy mentioned the trains basically. And other people I've debated in the past have been like, oh, well, they have shiny trains basically. And I'm like, well, this is the same energy as, okay, Hitler's doing the Holocaust, but look, he built the Autobahn. He's got shiny infrastructure projects. It's basically,
well, yeah, obviously if you're using it to obfuscate, yeah.
Factuals. And so when Rose, who was in there, was like, oh, because I said, excuse me, China is a police state doing a genocide. Like, really? We're going to be like, ooh, look at their trains. It's like,
I think that's
look at my Olympics.
It's a little bit different. It's a little bit different.
No, I don't think it's that different.
It is. Hang on, one sec.
The difference is the race of the people being
no,
genocide.
No, one sec.
Muslims,
no. Hang on. I'll tell you the difference, okay? The difference is in your debate, you were discussing the genocide, and then this person used the trains as a defense. What happened here is the exact opposite. Trains were being discussed, and you brought up the genocide and then brought up the Nazi thing as like to obfuscate. I feel like
No. You say trains are being discussed. I understand. We weren't. Now the original tweet was talking about Canada.
Trains. Yeah, and how we have it. We should have a.
But the response was big upping China, though.
Yeah, but they were big upping China's train system. It wasn't like there was a discussion being had about the genocide in the
Which is
comments.
the problem. That's why it's problematic. That's like they were just discussing Hitler's Olympic Stadium. They weren't discussing the Holocaust or the racism. They were saying it's a nice stadium.
So if you're discussing,
you understand why that would be a problematic discourse, because you're like, hello, the elephant in the room. That's a police state. That's a fascist police state doing a genocide. Like I've already said, I'm not against high-speed rail, but you know what? One type of trains that I am against, police states building trains of any kind and then using these as showpieces to deflect from and try to make us feel inferior.
But hang on, let me ask you a question.
And lecture us. I just got to finish on this,
Okay, sure, go ahead.
Because you asked about the Nazi trains, and so the reason why I brought that up, if you look at the full context,
this is like nonsense Red Scare shit. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
A reply to the first one is saying, oh well, you know, there's this HSR in China that can make the trip from Shanghai to Beijing in 5 hours or whatever, and I'm like, okay. Like I've already said, I'm a fan of the Shinkansen. It's a privately owned, capitalist, high-speed rail. It's great, luxurious, awesome. Efficient.
Yes, just because something is owned by the state does not make the country just like not capitalist or whatever. Oh God, he's just demented.
I'm not a fan of these like state-operated, centrally planned police state.
Okay, let me ask you.
So I gotta finish. So he says
Transport for London confirmed a police state.
They can do it in 5 hours, basically implying why can't we be like China or whatever. And I said, China is a police state doing a genocide. And then Rose comes in and says countries can do good things and bad things. And I'm like, oh, this to me was a throwback to the Micah Irfin, my counterfactuals. And I'm like, oh, this is basically the same energy as saying, well, Hitler, yeah, he did the Holocaust, but he also kept the trains running on time. That is the meme.
No, hang on.
And also, that's Mussolini, not Hitler.
You know what this is like? This is like saying in World War II, if someone was having a discussion about physicists, and then someone was like, hey, there's this guy, Germany has a really good physicist. There's this guy, Albert Einstein or whatever, okay? He's German, right, I think? And then you were like, no, well, look what Germany's doing. It's like we weren't even discussing that. We were discussing physics.
That's not a good analogy, Heem, and I'll tell you why. Because Germany, the Nazi party, the NSDAP, they didn't like give birth to Albert Einstein. It was like Hitler and Himmler like got it on, and then they spawned Albert Einstein.
That's not how it went down.
Albert Einstein existed in Germany, but he was independent of the NSDAP. He would have been there whether Hitler ever came to power or not. Whether
but maybe the train system would have.
No. But the difference, Heem, is if you look into that train system. In fact, the entire train network in China. Who created it? Who runs it? Who financed it? Who manages it? Oh, the Chinese Communist Party. It would be like if Hitler literally went into a lab and created Albert Einstein. Then you would say, oh, well, you can't say, oh, Albert Einstein's German and then Hitler's German or whatever. Albert Einstein wasn't a creation of Hitler. The railway is a creation of the police state.
Did Albert Einstein not get educated in Germany?
What did the police create the train network? This is just like this is. Oh, I don't even know how to respond to like how like traumatically smooth-brained all of this is.
Educated in Germany, yes, but Albert Einstein. Understand the thing about Albert Einstein is that he predated and did not identify with the ideology of Hitler. And whereas the trains, one, they're inanimate objects, but two, they are the product, they are the propaganda, they are the showpiece, they are the tool.
It's just the rail network. People use it to get from place to place. That's what it's there for. It's there because people need to get from place to place, so they built a thing to get people from place to place. This is absolute nonsense.
Of a brutally authoritarian regime that none of us would ever want to live under. Not you, not your audience, not myself, and if we're being honest, not any of Hawes's viewers either. They're just a bunch of edgy LARPers that wouldn't last a day in a dictatorship. And so the thing is, Rose said that countries can do good things and bad things, but understand when an authoritarian police state makes their control system, makes their management of their population more, I guess, efficient or whatever, understand that that's not a good thing. That's actually a challenge to liberal hegemony. That's actually them consolidating.
China building trains, that is apparently a risk risk to liberal hegemony. Do you listen to the words that are coming out of your mouth, Kevin? What the fuck is he talking about? This is, I don't know. This took a weird turn very
in
quickly.
their power.
No,
That's
I think
not
it has
good. It's in the
real
service
talk.
of
I
a
think it
brutally repressive
real
regime
one
that
sec.
took
Sorry.
over a
No,
million Uyghurs,
no. I don't think it's that
chained them
deep.
onto trains,
You
and
know what?
deported them to.
They could just put them in cars, Kevin. I'm sorry, this is nonsense.
You know, hang on
concentration
one
camps to
sec.
be
One sec.
tortured
Okay,
and
hang
gang
on. You're
raped.
gish galloping. One sec.
So
So I think it has more to do with the fact that they have a huge population. They have cities that have millions of people. I think I looked it up. They have like something like 50 cities. How many cities does China have over 1 million population? How
it's
many
like 70 or something.
cities China over 1 million
Like,
population?
it's definitely higher than 50. I believe.
160 cities
Okay,
with over 1 million
there you go.
population. That's why they built the train system.
Okay, but understand, right? So if I ask you, what would you prefer? A more consolidated and centrally managed CCP, or a weaker and poorer and more disconnected CCP? What would you say?
Wait, what is the
view
question?
this as a threat. I view it as a threat. I view it as being in the service to a genocidal dictatorship, and I do not want to see them get stronger. So
I don't understand. So do you ever praise anything that the US or Canada does?
what?
Do you ever praise the US or Canada in any way?
I mean, I'm often critical of the governments, but the U.S. and Canada as countries are great
So,
countries.
but they do horrible things. They Canada genocided the natives and continues
yeah,
to.
like 100 years and more ago. So, like, to understand that the deportations I was talking about of the Uyghurs, that didn't happen in the 1800s.
Of course, I know it's
happening.
happening. Sure, I understand that.
Now.
I understand. I understand. But
So this is not a fair equivalence to be like, oh, but Canada did stuff 100 years ago. It's like, okay.
no. I'm not saying Canada's the same as China. Okay, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, where do you draw the line? Let's say it was 10 years ago or 50. Like, where's your line of saying, like, as soon as this line has been crossed, that you can't say anything? You can't say that some country has accomplished something, anything good. Like, even if that's a discussion that's being had. If we're talking about mathematics, we can't say that China has good mathematics. If we're talking about anything, if we're talking about
hey Heem, did the NSDAP, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, did they accomplish anything good in Germany? Did they do any good projects, any good stuff?
Yeah, they did the Autobahn, of course.
Okay, so but understand why that is ultimately problematic, though, right? Because they to say
I can't. This is just nonsense.
oh, well, they did the Autobahn and that's good or whatever. What was it built in the service of? It was built in the service of a fascist police state.
Yeah,
I don't actually think it's a good thing. I don't think that.
Can you praise the Autobahn now?
No, but the Autobahn is being used for good things now. Just because it was created with a bad purpose does not completely disaffect the entire utility of the project to begin with. Fucking hell, Kevin! Like, get a brain.
Praise it now.
I don't think my enemy having a better infrastructure system is a good thing. I don't.
Can you say now that the Autobahn is a successful project, that it's some impressive highway, or no?
Oh, it's like driving over the road of bones in Siberia. It's like, yeah, it's a road. It'll get you to Magadan. But understand.
So, okay, what about? Okay, let me ask you. Can we praise anything? Can we praise?
Understand that was built on the blood of slavery, right?
Can we praise anything that Germany has done since?
Okay, well that means that we can't like anything of America because all of America's built on slavery, right? Burn America down to the ground. Let's get rid of it all forever, theoretically in Roblox, right? Because it was built on slavery, and so we can't use it now. We can't. You cherish its existence because it was built on slavery, so therefore it's entirely bad, and we throw it all away. This is literally the argument that Kevin is making right now.
Well, since is different because since it matters in what service a project is done under an existing ideology, right? I'm not saying don't use the Autobahn. All I'm saying is that it was built for very nefarious means. Because
was it built for nefarious means, or was it? Wait one sec. Sorry, one sec. Or was it built just as an infrastructure project? Someone in chat is saying it started during the Weimar Republic. Anyways.
Yeah, well, with Hitler and Hitler's what would you call it? Hitler's continuation of that. Understand. Just an infrastructure project of a genocidal.
It doesn't matter. Can we just talk about the actual project itself and the utility of it, not what the intention of using the project as a
police state is a bad thing. It's in the service.
Yeah, burn Manchester. No more Manchester anymore. Let's go.
Like I don't see how we can say that them expanding their infrastructure is good. It makes it harder to fight them. I don't understand that.
Because we're not saying, oh, it's good relative to us. We're just saying it's an accomplishment that we can adopt. If, let's say, some Iranian physicist comes up with something, you're not going to say, oh wow, look, this Iranian physicist discovered this thing.
Well, no, look, it depends on the ideology for one. So again, that's very important, because if there's a dissident in Iran that does not like the Ayatollah and discovers some stuff, great. Let's say that they're a big fanboy of Iran. I'm going to be like, oh, that's a threat. We should probably deal with them.
But can't you say, hey, this accomplishment, this discovery they made is impressive?
Oh, I'll say, look, I've said that before. Like, oh, that's impressive at the rate that Stalin was able to get these tanks rolling out. Look at how many people he killed and starved to do
No,
that.
no,
It's
no,
like,
no.
yeah, it's
You're, no, no, no,
impressive.
no, no, no.
No,
I'm
no,
talking
no,
about
no,
something
no.
that's actually.
It
Wait one sec.
is.
I'm talking about something. You're making a meme about how fast he was able to roll out tanks and kill people. I'm talking about saying that somebody or some government has accomplished something that we can adopt.
But see, that's where it gets to be a problematic narrative, because I'm not saying don't build rail here. What I'm saying is don't say, oh, why can't we be like China? Because understand, one of the reasons why the CCP does this and why they promote this narrative abroad is it's not, they don't want us to just have trains. Understand, that's the first step. What they want is for us to ultimately be under their hegemonic and consolidated control. That's their.
No, they really don't. I mean, they want us to be consolidated under their economic control in general, but they're not using the trains to do that with. They're using fucking cobalt mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and by infiltrating, kind of the coal mining system in Australia. They're investing in businesses and creating debt traps for countries like in the Caribbean and in Africa. That's what they're actually doing with like Belt and Road. What they're not doing is building trains and then going, look at the shiny trains, and then using them to build hegemonic power. This is This is absolute lunacy.
Their end goal. They've been doing this a lot in Canada. You look at Huawei. You look at their relationship with the government. You look at the pressure to condemn the Uyghur genocide.
So you think that basically saying, hey, look at this impressive train system, that's like tacit approval of the entire government, their ideology, the genocide?
No, in fact, if somebody came out on Twitter and said, and in fact, a lot of people in the wake of all this controversy in the last week did do this. They came out and said, "Oh, he thinks trains are authoritarian." Well, authoritarianism is based, and they'll have like a picture of Mao being like, "Death."
Yeah, those people, fuck those people. Fuck those people.
But understand. If somebody comes out on Twitter and says, "Yes, I support China and I support everything that the CCP does, and we should have trains like them," I actually don't think that that's as much of a problem because nobody's really going to listen to them. I actually think it gets worse when somebody says, "Oh, well, I don't like the regime or whatever," but like I'm just going to big up their latest pet project and make them look good. I think that's more insidious because people trust those people, and now you're normalizing CCP celebration, and that's disgusting. Because again, this is a regime that just in the last few years took over a million Uyghurs and shackled them on the trains and carted them off to deportation camps to be gang raped and murdered. So,
I know. Okay, let me ask you a question. Do you
think that's the problem with the people running the trains, not the trains themselves?
Volkswagen should be shut down? It was like, obviously the Nazi mobile, right?
Yeah, it's a Nazi mobile. Volkswagen, when it was under NSDAP management, evil. Volkswagen today, benign.
But what was it built in the service of?
But it doesn't.
What was it built in the service of?
Like understand. Look, I want to be clear about saying, like, let's say that we actually got, what I want, and we had a revolution in China, and they were a democracy tomorrow. Would I tell people don't use those trains because the CCP?
But they were built.
No. Would I tell people don't use the trains because the CCP built them? No, I'd say, okay, well, they inherited this infrastructure. Why not use it? What I'm saying though is don't celebrate the creators of it, because understand that what
no one celebrates. No, that's the thing. No one is celebrating the creators. They were celebrating the thing that exists.
Yeah, and the thing that exists right now, as it stands right now under CCP occupation, is the consolidation of some would call them fascists, other would call them socialists, whatever you want to call it, I don't actually care, an authoritarian/totalitarian, or at least wannabe totalitarian dictatorship. Xi Jinping is trying to get to totalitarianism again, but he's trying to do the Mao thing. So no, I understand if a vile regime that's waging a genocide builds an infrastructure project, understand they're not doing that out of the goodness of their hearts. They're doing it because they want.
I'm sorry, do you just think that everything a totalitarian nation does is in service of their own national, international image? Or do you not think they have some reason for doing things for the utility of the project in general? Do you think the Soviet Union built a bunch of houses so that the rest of the planet looks at their houses and went, oh, look at the nice houses, I'm going to be like the Soviet Union? No, they built houses because people needed to live in places, so they built the houses for them to live in. It's really not hard.
Want to bolster their control over the country, and they know that having a
this man has fucking super brains,
a planned infrastructure network.
Let me ask you a question.
They can control where everybody goes, when they go, all this sort of stuff. They can control basically every facet of it, because understand, it's not privatized. It's run by the China Rail Corporation. It's all CCP controlled.
Sure. Let me ask you a question.
It is yet another extension of their power, and I'm not going to celebrate that. Even if I would say after they fall and we have a democratic China, use it. Okay, that's cool, but do not praise those, and also don't lend implicit praise to those that built it, because they built it with the aim of augmenting their.
But here's what I have to push back a little bit on you.
And butchering control over their country.
Here's what I have to push back a little bit on, okay? I'm not a fan of fucking Chinese government or the way they do things, so I don't want you to get this confused as though I'm trying to defend them or something. I'm trying to ask you if you think that authoritarian, fascist, fucking police state, whatever, can do things for its citizens that are in the interest of its citizens. For example, building public transit. Or is everything they do like this insidious thing with ulterior motives? Like, for example, going back to the Autobahn, could it be that the Autobahn was just built because cars were becoming prominent and they thought, hey, it would be smart to invest and build this highway, or no, it has to be
Yeah,
insidious?
almost
Well, you have
certainly.
to keep it in the historical context. So if you look at the propaganda films and stuff of Hitler speaking on the Autobahn when he went to Nuremberg, and he did his whole rally on class, where he talked about how the German people are one class and how we all work, and how if you don't work, you're an enemy of the state and all this stuff and everything. And when he announces like these big public works projects where all the white Germans they get to go to work, and they build Germany for the Aryan people and all this stuff and everything, understand the purpose for which these things were designed were to stimulate employment in the service of boosting the economy of a regime that had plans that they followed through on to butcher Europe. And so that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing.
But they were planted by the SDP pre Fire Act.
Drove their economic engine to commit mass
Sure, so,
horrors on Europe.
of course,
so
yes.
that's despicable. So.
But you agree with me that a fascistic authoritarian government can still do things that are just only in the interest of its citizens?
Well,
like, for example, let's say,
I mean, you're just kind of following Kevin at this point, but
yeah, the people getting forced onto those trains to go to re-education camps to get gang raped or slaughtered.
yeah,
or
but they don't all have to. Wait, one second.
Those are their citizens, right?
But no, not just them, but other people that regular.
Okay,
people.
not just Jews, but also white Aryan Germans.
So what I'm saying is that
you have to keep it in the context of what they're doing in the minorities.
No, because
I'm
trying to pull back and ask if you believe what you believe, not what happened.
No, but the Nazis used trains, therefore trains are bad.
Okay, I want to know: do you believe that a country can exist that's authoritarian, fascistic, so on and so forth, that can do things just like an infrastructure program or something that isn't insidious in nature? It's just literally for the well-being of its people.
No, because the fact that these states exist, understand, follow where I'm saying here. The fact that these states exist and the fact that these states have a self-preservation mechanism, in other words, they want to be around tomorrow. They don't want to have a revolution tomorrow. They also want to have it easier to do their job tomorrow than it is today, which means better security apparatus, better surveillance apparatus.
Well, in the same way that a democratic state wants to make sure they get voted in the next election, so they do things people will like. It's not difficult, Kevin.
Bigger economic engine, so you can have a bigger war machine, all this stuff, better control, all of these sorts of things, all of these big public works infrastructure. Understand why they're done. Did the CCP do this because there's some guy in China in Shanghai that really likes trains, and let's make him happy?
No, they do it because they want to move.
They did this because I understand why did
their
they
population.
do this?
They have a massive population.
They wanted an easier control of their population.
No, Kevin, I genuinely think it's because they have a massive population with massive cities, 160 cities with 1 million people population, and they want to be able to move these people quickly and efficiently. They can't have cars for everyone when there's that many people. I think.
Well, yeah, but it's an infrastructure project, so it contributes to productivity and economic growth. They could be doing that for completely, self-centered reasons in the first place, just from an macroeconomic perspective.
That's it.
Yeah, but understand, when you have a regime like this, right?
Hey again, I hope you enjoyed the first part of this intense debate. Make sure to check the next video where we will be discussing foreign policy and interventionism versus more hands-off diplomatic approach. It gets even more heated than this first part was, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Thanks for watching the whole first part of the debate. You made it this far. Congrats. And if you really enjoy this type of content, consider supporting me, whether by becoming a member on YouTube or by leaving thanks in the comments with a super chat thanks thing, or by subscribing to my Patreon at patreon.com/heem_.
Go support him. He makes good content. Just him everywhere. Let me go back in the. Let me exit full screen. There you can see YouTube is him, Twitch is him, Twitter the only him. Go. Support him. Go follow him. Go follow his stuff. It was good. But yeah, so it turns out Kevin Castley. I was never aware of the fact that he had soup for brains, but I now know for certain that he does definitely have soup for brains. We now know for sure that he is a soup-brained, smooth-brained individual. But I think I covered most of what I needed to cover whilst we're actually watching that, so that seems good enough for me. Yeah, it was wild just kind of watching like the internal process of his mind runs. But I think he always feels like he's in this kind of internal kind of war against communism. I think he still lives in the Cold War at this point. He thinks that like the global kind of economic situation against China is like Cold War Part 2, but economic rather than military. I don't even fucking know at this point. Either way, he has brain poisoning, and I do hope that since he does live in Canada, hopefully he will get better due to the universal healthcare. The smoothest and most blended of soups. That is that is Kevin Castley's brain. Just thought I would show everyone this excellent clip before we move on to Keith and his new plan for these. Basically, he's doing another relaunch anyway. Is that still just the GOP playbook? Yes. So we're just going to watch this clip of someone called Rosa accosting Keith in Liverpool. It's an excellent clip. And I'm just going to preface what we're going to watch later with this little clip, because I think it's really good.
Can I just say that I don't know how you've got the guts to come to this city after you have been being interviewed and doing columns for the Sun newspaper.
It's in Liverpool, if you can guess from the accent.
After the way we as a city were abused, and after the way we as a city, the Hillsborough victims were abused by that paper, and you've come here. Secondly, you lied to us about uniting the party. I'm still a Labour Party.
Do you want to go and see some photos, Keith? Do you want to? Sounds like a good idea. The face of a man with lots of regrets.
Remember, and you've expelled and witch hunted in the most vicious way I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I've been a member of the Labour Party for a long, long time. You have absolutely said you had 10 pledges, you were going to carry on the Corbyn legacy. And ever since, you've done nothing but distance yourself from the ideas which tens of thousands of people joined the Labour Party to support.
Hundreds of thousands.
And all you've done is feed into the Tory ideology of not supporting strikes, of carrying on with the privatisation of our health service. You're doing everything to feed into a Tory victory. Because we may as well have a Tory if we have a person like you who lies to the party. It's dishonesty.
Thank you very much.
And our health service is going right down the pan. And you have a big responsibility, the working class people of this country.
Can you move back, please?
Excuse me. You're just, don't be getting physical with me.
I'm not touching you. Can you move back then, please?
You're touching my breast.
Can you move back, please?
Now move back.
No, can you move
I want
back,
to go
please?
to the toilet.
Toilet's over that way.
True. No word of a lie. And she's going pretty viral, which is good. Happy to see. But it just shows that, she's right. Like, plenty of people did join the party. There's a reason why the party is almost close to bankruptcy now. So they don't have the membership subs to be able to continue funding the party in the way they did previously, where they're one of the richest parties in Europe previously, and now they're on the brink of bankruptcy. It all doesn't help when they palm off a bunch of the coffers to their mates they used to try and destroy Corbyn, as we found out in the Ford report. But I digress. Anyway, Keir Starmer has just done yet another relaunch where he's going to be setting out Labour's mission for economic growth, which apparently is their shtick, just like the whole of the Conservatives, because there's no other narrative, as I've gone over on TikTok previously. The narrative is entirely the same as the Tories now. They all have one singular goal. There's nothing really that separates them, especially as Keith clearly wants to make sure he doesn't explicitly say a bunch of the Tory stuff is bad, like the Rwanda plan. He's not explicitly condemned it, other than for it being inefficient and unworkable, rather than racist or anything like that. But either way, I digress. He's still not given us any actual policy prescriptions, but there's a whole half an hour talk that he's got going on here, where we should be able to find out what he actually believes in and what plans he actually has to try and make things better for the country moving forward. So we'll see. We'll have a look and see what he has to say about it. Let's go and have a look.
Other candidates for Prime Minister who will also define the choice for their party to be about the economy and about growth. But what a choice it is. In one corner you have Rishi Sunak, the architect of the cost of living crisis. In the other you have Liz Truss, the latest graduate from the School of Magic Monetary Economics. Neither of them has the answer.
So he's just literally using the same attack lines that Theresa May used against his own party 5 years ago. Literally, he's just become
Theresa May. Like the briefcase has become sentient now, folks.
To the economic challenges that we face. And who can be surprised? Under their watch, the average British family is £8,800 poorer than their equivalents in advanced economies. Now, that's not just a failure of policy. It's a failure of philosophy. And their leadership contest is
the same philosophy that you have, that you're espousing right now.
not going to change that. Because both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss rage against the dying of the Thatcherite light. They don't understand. Economic strength in the 21st century needs partnership. They don't believe you need state and market, business and worker.
No, they do believe you need state and market. They are neoliberals. They are under the impression that their whole ideology is that the purpose of the state is to be able to maintain competition. The state should intervene in markets to make sure the competition continues to happen. That is their political ideology. And they think the market should be interfered with to make them as competitive as possible, and to make other things that shouldn't be marketized competitive through marketization too. And that is the role of the state. They do believe in the role of the state. They see it through a different lens than a social democrat would.
The everyday economy and the technological frontier, all contributing together if you want strong, secure and fair growth. I'm under no such illusions. Thank you. Rebooting our economy is the way we will define our task in government. And it will ask searching questions of my party and our instincts. We can't be like the Tories, clinging to the old ideas, trapped.
You are literally a rerun of Blairism. You are just clinging to old ideas. You're proposing literally nothing new. I mean, mostly because you've not proposed anything. In what possible way is there anything else other than just clinging on to new ideas by being continuity neoliberalism, by being continuity Blairism? Nothing will fundamentally change. Oh, well, I'm pragmatic, so I can't do any nationalisation, as has been confirmed by Rachel Reeves earlier today. What is that other than holding on to old ways of old models of doing things?
In our history. To give Britain the fresh start it needs, we need a new approach. My goal is straightforward: to maximise the contribution we all make to national prosperity. Every business, every person, every community. Now, it sounds simple, but in reality, we failed to do this for decades. The best of British business is the best in the world, but we've geared our whole economy to delivering only for those firms. And we've been complacent about the number of jobs created which are low pay and insecure, when insecurity stops people getting on. And
you think that we've just created the wrong jobs? Well, what do you think happened? Do you think people decided to create the jobs that were bad because that's what the macroeconomic policy of the government detailed was necessary? Or was it just because that is the best way of building a business model, by making sure that you pay people as little as possible, because people's wages haven't been rising at all, because the ways in which profit has been used to have been used as to maximise throughout the current economic model that we have, because there's been not enough state intervention into the economy. Like, that is an issue, not of the jobs that were created, but the jobs of the entire economic model in general.
Too few communities feel the benefit of the wealth that we create, which makes people feel that hard work is not rewarded. Now, in a nutshell, we draw our economic strength from...
But I think that's not. I mean, that's the one of the first true things that you said. In that it is solely the labour that creates the wealth of civilization. Let us not be under any other pretense of that. It is the labour that creates that wealth. And he's correct in saying that the people who do the work don't get a big enough share of that. And that is a reasonable point for him to make. But the question is he actually going to make any policy prescriptions to fix that issue?
Too few places. And like a skyscraper built without foundations, that ultimately leaves us weak. And if you want evidence of this, look no further than the cost of living crisis. Everywhere I go, I hear the same stories. People scared about the future, worried that when winter comes, they'll face horrible choices about what to spend their money on. Pensioners who can't afford to turn on the heating. Families cutting back on what they buy their children. But there's one thing I hear time and time...
It's almost like the marketisation of the energy sector was bad.
Again, that worries me more than anything else. And that is working people telling me hard work doesn't pay. That they're working harder and harder just to stand still. Now, that alarms me for two reasons. First, because I've been lucky enough to take a journey in my life from a working class family to head of the Crown Prosecution Service. And my fear is an economy so racked by low growth and insecurity means people from my background can't get on. Second, because, honestly, what does it say about the state of Britain when working people feel that hard work doesn't pay? What does it say about the health of our country, the health even of our democracy? It says an unwritten contract is broken. A contract that says in return for hard work, you get a fair reward, that you don't have to feel insecure about your prospects, that your contribution is respected. It's a two-way thing. A strong national economy needs everyone making the best contribution that they can, whatever their circumstances, wherever they live. But in exchange, we must make sure the contribution working people make to that national effort is fairly rewarded, that hard work does pay, that their effort is respected.
Nothing incorrect about the prescriptions that he's making here. It's just, how are we going to go about getting to that point?
They enjoy the security they need to get on. To do all that, we need three things: growth, growth, growth.
No. Redistribution, redistribution, redistribution.
The policy they bring forward will be judged by the contribution it makes to growth and productivity. Because everything I want for Britain comes back to this central mission. Without growth, we won't get a high-wage economy. Without growth, we can't...
Oh, please stop using terms like high-wage economy. We need fairer economy. We need a fairer economy where people actually get more of the fruits of their labour. Like, if you're saying, we need to grow the economy, we'll still have the stark differences in remuneration. And just exasperated that it's just we just literally hear exactly the same from every camp. Every single camp, both within Labour and with the Conservative Party, the line is, we need growth, we need high-wage economy, that'll make people better off. And I'm like, no, the issue is the fact that the wealth that's being created is in the wrong hands.
Vitalise public services. Without growth, we can't repair the broken contract, re-energise communities, or unite the country. Low-growth countries are weaker at standing up for the national interest. Low-growth economies can't support people from my background to get on. Low-growth economies can't rise to meet the challenges of...
The problem is not to do with growth. The problem is that people in this country are working hard. They are creating the wealth that can be used to be able to generate the civilization that we live in. And all of that work is being used to deliver profits for the shareholders of the companies that they work for that skim off the top of the value of their labour, right? The issue isn't that the money isn't there. The issue is that the money is in the wrong hands. Like, if you're saying, well, hard work doesn't pay well, if we grow the economy and we have more productivity, but we still see the same disparity in who gets paid what out of the work that gets done, then people still aren't being paid fairly for the hard work they're being done, which doesn't satisfy the first point that you've said when you've gone into this monologue, Keith.
The future. Challenges like climate change. And I want to be really clear on this point. We will not be distracted by the siren calls from the right or the left that say economic growth and net zero do not go together. That these
no one from the left is saying that, you stupid cunt.
Two objectives are somehow in tension, or even that we should actively pursue a policy of no growth. I reject that completely. It is totally the wrong way round. A plan for net zero needs growth. A plan for
it doesn't necessarily need growth. Growth would be nice. I'm happy to have some growth. Growth is good for the economy in a capitalist society, right? We're not going to turn into like a degrowth economy like overnight. That's not what anyone's asking for. What we actually really need is, again, a better distribution of the wealth and a transformative energy policy that changes the method of production. Again, this is a distribution issue. It's not a size issue. It's not a growth issue. Growth is fine. I'm happy for you to prioritize growth at some point within the economy. I'm happy for that to be there. That's not a real issue. But to say that that's just going to magically fix our net zero saga and it's going to magically fix work remuneration is nonsense. It's nonsensical.
Growth needs net zero. This is about the future, of course. Fail to tackle climate change, and you can forget about growth. There's no bigger risk to business. Look at how our infrastructure has struggled in the last few weeks in the heat. But tackling climate change is also an opportunity to create wealth in the here and now. That's why Labour is committed to a climate investment pledge worth £28 billion until 2030. And we see that.
Right, we have a singular policy, and it's a good one. They're going to invest into a green infrastructure project. Right, brilliant. That's going to make sure we have more people employed in this sector to be able to create the transition to the green economy. Good. Okay, brilliant. We have a good policy. That's one, right? One good policy that we've got. We're going to pin in that. We'll continue having a look more moving forward.
That pledge as a down payment that will unlock the private investment which delivers the next generation of jobs.
So it's already admitted there that that you can use the magic money tree as long as you're putting it into infrastructure to create more dividends moving forward, right? So there is a magic money tree if it's for infrastructure projects. Correct. That's literally how a governmental economy works, Keith. Well done.
Because the way I see it, some nation is going to lead the world in electric vehicles, in floating offshore wind, in new hydrogen and technological developments. Why not Britain? Why not Britain? But to maximise our collective contribution, we must be clear.
I love how this is completely against. I'm going to invest all of this money into an infrastructure project. I'm like, okay, so we were talking about magic money trees earlier. Is this not a magic money tree project? Well, yes, it is. But we as the left-wing party and the left-wing people should be saying, yeah, good. That's a good thing. That's fine. That's a fine use of the magic money tree, Keith, because it does exist.
About the kind of growth that we need. The growth I want for Britain is strong, secure, and fair. Strong because it will build a foundation where every business and every person plays a role. Secure because it will produce good jobs that don't leave people feeling insecure. And fair because it will unlock the potential of every place, every community, every town, and every city. This last point is so important and strikes at the structural weakness of our economy. It's not an issue of city versus town. The productivity gap between our cities and their equivalents in Europe is already too big. And too many of our towns don't have a fair chance to contribute in an economy still dominated by London and the South East. This is the hurdle we must clear. We need growth that is strong, secure, and fair to re-establish that contract between people and prosperity.
And how are you going to do that? Are you perhaps going to use, community wealth building funds and cooperative investment projects like they have, in Preston, the place in the north which is doing really well because of those local projects and continues to have an incredibly high Labour majority in council voting and also in MPs voting as well, like a general elections? Have you maybe considered that productivity goes up within a cooperative economy because people have their own investment in the project that's going on? Like, if you want to boost productivity, let's see some investment into the cooperative sector.
The distinction I would make is this. An economy can grow and leave some of its people behind. But a nation based on contribution cannot grow in that way. But of course,
But the contribution, initially, you're allowing the economy to be having wealth extracted from it by people who do not contribute, people who just have capital, sit on capital, and use it to generate more capital at the expense of the workers who do the actual labour to create that wealth in the first place.
Promises need a plan. Boosterism and fantasy economics are not the same as ambition. So today, I want to share with you some of the plans Labour has to reboot growth and set out 5 principles that will guide my government in growing our economic contribution. These are: first, we will be financially responsible. Second, we will be distinctively British. Third, we will work in partnership with business. Fourth, we will re-energise communities and spread economic power. And fifth, we will refocus our investment on boosting productivity.
So that means nothing. But again, these are all noble goals, but there's no actual prescriptions that you've made out. I guess he's still got another 20 minutes to set out the way in which he's going to have policy prescriptions to achieve those goals. But you also have to do that within the frame of making hard work pay, so to speak, and creating a fairer economy. But then again, he's not mentioned the word fair at all, because fair is the scary leftist buzzword that means that the meritocracy will be usurped somehow, as if that one existed previously.
Now, let me take each of these in turn, starting with the most direct, financial responsibility. The risk of rising inflation could not be clearer. So we will not announce a single penny of day-to-day spending without saying how we would pay for it. We will only borrow to invest to meet the challenges of the future. That's what our climate investment pledge is all about. And we will set a target.
Okay, well, he's admitted that he can make those investments either by borrowing or by printing because it's non-inflationary, right? You could literally just say, well, this is an infrastructure project, so it's non-inflationary, and then that's fine. You've covered that base.
Target to reduce debt as an overall share of our economy. That's the responsible thing to do. And contrast that with the Conservative competition to waste more of your money. That contrast could not be starker. With me and with Rachel Reeves, you will always get sound finances, careful spending, strong, secure, and fair growth. There will be no
Okay, well, he's used fair. Okay, all right.
magic money tree economics with us.
No, but that is magic money tree economics. Saying that we can use additional money for infrastructure projects because they're non-inflationary. That is literally like modern monetary theory. That is MMT. That's one of the precepts of MMT, that you can engage in as much non-inflationary spending as you like. Whatever. I'm just going to get mad if I continue going on.
My second principle is that we must grow our contribution in a distinctively British way. This means two things. First, that we need resilient supply chains in sectors which are vital for British security and growth. That's why we have a strategy to buy, make and sell more in Britain. Why £3 billion of our climate investment pledge will help forge a new future for our steel industry, and why we have committed to new public procurement rules that will build up Britain's sovereign capabilities in key industries. And let me be clear, it isn't protectionist to say
You're absolutely right. They are just. But all the time, this is just buzzwords. We're going to make things more. Do more Britain. Be more British. I'm like, well, okay, we're going to have to convince people to move back into Britain after we just, fucking nuked our economy with Brexit.
Or somehow old-fashioned. Britain will always be an outward-facing, confident, trading nation. But all around the world, businesses are looking again at the resilience of their supply chains, reacting to the crises we've faced and will face in the future.
That's the big issue. Is like, how are you going to? I think what he sounds like he's proposing. Obviously, he's not made any actual prescriptions here, but what he sounds like he's proposing is a change towards a more kind of manufacturing-centered economy, away from a service economy, to be able to build stuff in Britain, to then be able to use as kind of a way of overseas trading and some kind of self-sufficiency. Like I said, not necessarily protectionism, but how are you going to do that? How are you going to get business to come over here, given that it's going to cost more to be able to export to the closest new place to export to? And then also, where are you going to get all these raw materials? How are you going to be able to build, again, even more infrastructure, which I guess you could use if you wanted to engage in non-inflationary government spending to do so, to build the infrastructure available to take advantage of those natural resources. We don't even have that many. We don't even have that many natural resources left, to be honest. They just want to reopen the coal mines, right? Like,
countries must do the same. Second, a British approach means we can't transplant the economic model of another country onto ours. 2 weeks ago, I met Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, and leader of our sister party, the SPD. He is showing that when levelling up is based on practical plans, not far...
Why are you calling it levelling up? Why are you borrowing the Tory slogan but buzzword that they created, that's essentially meaningless and can be transposed onto any policy platform? Why are you borrowing conservative ideology? Like, why are you borrowing the magic money tree line? Why are you borrowing the levelling up line? Why are you borrowing up like the financially responsible line, talking about the economy like it's a household budget? Why are you just becoming a Tory? Why are you the Tories? Why?
Far-fetched promises. Amazing things can happen. In eastern Germany right now, some of the poorest parts of the country are leading the continent in the lucrative race to develop batteries that store renewable energy. This is what can be done. And as Lisa Nandy has spelt out, just because the Tory commitment to levelling up is dead, doesn't mean the idea of levelling up is dead. Labour will take it on. But to do this in a way...
Literally just saying, oh, the Tories had a good plan, so we're going to copy them, but do it better. Okay, brilliant, well done. Well done. Literally, you are just becoming a Tory.
Which isn't pure boosterism. We must be honest about British strengths. Take manufacturing. Britain has an extraordinary genius when it comes to manufacturing. We lead the world in pharmaceuticals, bioscience, aerospace. The Nissan factory in Sunderland is one of the most productive in Europe. And the COVID-19 vaccine, developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University, has saved millions of lives around the world. When I was in Airbus in Filton recently, I saw them working with 3D engineering, literally shaping components by bringing together particles and matter in a way that was unimaginable in the factory my dad used to work in. We can and should take advantage of these strengths. The road to higher growth and productivity runs right through them. But we're not Germany.
But they're not even standing for not being Tories, because he's essentially parroting a bunch of the Tory buzzwords regardless anyway. He's talking like a Tory and acting like a Tory. So why not call him a fucking Tory? Like, what he really is saying is that he's not Boris Johnson or not Rishi Sunak or not Liz Truss. It's not about ideology. It's not about policy platforms. All it is just, I am not the bad people. Like, juxtaposing himself through personality rather than through policy.
The role manufacturing plays in our economy will always be different. And we have superpower strengths in universities, in creative industries, in exporting services that other countries can't compete with. The challenge in both services and manufacturing is the same. The best of British is the best in the world. And the way we stay competitive is to get more of it. More innovation, more new technology, more research and development, more unlocking the commercial power of our universities and specialising
100%.
in the knowledge-rich industries of the future, and more startups. Which is why we've asked Lord Jim O'Neill to look at how we can make Britain the best country in the world to start a new business. And why we have a plan
You're the Labour Party, why do you care about business?
to make Brexit work that doesn't ignore the strength of our services or our universities. But an economy that grows on contribution must rest on strong foundations. Foundations that are there in every community. That is why the work that Rachel's been doing on the everyday economy is so important. Retail, education, health and care. We saw in the pandemic how much of the wealth we create depends on these sectors being strong. And for too long, industrial strategy has simply ignored them. And with that, ignored one of Britain's distinctive challenges on growth. Labour's industrial strategy will contain a plan for the everyday economy. And our New Deal for working people will introduce new employment rights to give greater security for people working in it.
Please don't call it a New Deal. Please don't pretend like it's anything like a New Deal. Like, more employment rights is good. I'm happy for that. But it's not a New Deal. Please don't call it that.
That brings me to my third principle, partnership. For growth that is strong, secure and fair, we must work together. We need a real partnership between state and market, business and worker, the everyday economy and the technological frontier. And it's the job of a modern industrial strategy to make sure this partnership grows our collective contribution, not in a nostalgic way where government directs the activities of businesses. Modern industrial strategy isn't about growing the size of the state, it's about what the state does, how it supports business to innovate and to grow.
No, it should be about growing the state, because we need to demarketize inelastic economies. Like, please. Any basic social democrat should fucking know this, or the leader of a social democratic party.
Brings in the creative brilliance of our universities and applies them to the national missions that we must all contribute towards, whether that's leading the world in artificial intelligence or applying our genius to the challenge of net zero. Here at the Spine Centre, we're in the middle of the Knowledge Quarter, innovation all around us. Just down the road at the Materials Innovation Factory, the University of Liverpool and Unilever are partnering to bridge the gap between scientific research and production, developing the new materials we need to tackle climate change.
Ah, yes, Labour's best friend, Unilever. Brilliant. Thanks, Keith.
Or discover life-saving new medicines. We need to do so much more of this mission-driven partnership. But the government doesn't have a plan. And we have a massive job on our hands when it comes to private investment. For decades, we've trailed our competitors. In France, businesses invest around 30% more relative to GDP every year. If we could just close this gap, we would land a serious blow in our battle against low growth. And we know it requires public investment. That's why we have our climate investment pledge. We know it requires fair taxation, which is why we will scrap business rates and replace them with a system that levels the playing field.
Why are you talking about income taxes and national insurance? what the fuck? Why are we talking about lowering business taxes specifically? I mean, having a stratified set way of doing business rates is probably a positive change. I'll grant you that. Like, that if there's anything we should do, like changing these taxation rates to be massively kind of impactful on the biggest players in the economy is a good thing. But if you're trying to win votes, please try and win votes from people who will benefit from things like reduced income tax on the lowest people on the economy, reducing the way in which national insurance is a contribution for people on the lowest end of the economy, the things that were risen under the Tories as a regressive tax. Like, I don't care like large scale about what taxes businesses have really and truly, because they clearly haven't hampered the way in which they exist, right?
But we also know it requires stability, and that requires institutions that take